the new setup, you can get a new screen. But because of the new screen.
No, we're just trying to do something different based on the better visibility angle.
Yeah, was it last month we tried this for the first time? I liked it. I think it worked well.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we were on the other side though. I
Test 1, 2, 3. Oh, hold on.
Okay, I get that right.
Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call this December regular meeting of the City Plan Commission to order. It is Tuesday, December 12th. It is 4:48 p.m. Let's start with a roll call. Go around starting with Noel.
Noel Sanchez.
Charlotte Lipschitz.
Dave Caldwell.
Sharon Gardner, legal counsel.
Properties are staff.
Shoyan Mandrakar, DPD staff.
And I am Michael Gazdacko, Chair. We'll roll it into the approval of the minutes from the November 14th, 2023 meeting. You all should have received those in advance of this meeting. I reviewed them. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a second. We'll go around and do a voice vote. All in favor? Well, just all in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, any abstentions? The minutes pass. You also received in advance of this meeting, the 2024 draft meeting calendar. Have you all had a chance to review that? It's not a normal circumstance where it actually ends up that it's the third Tuesday of every month of next year, which is kind of fun. You don't have to think about it as hard, but it works out. Anyone have any comments?
Works for me.
Let me take a motion to approve the meeting calendar as drafted.
I make a motion to approve the meeting calendar as drafted.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, I would just do, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? The meeting calendar is approved. Mr. Azar.
Yes, I'm going to actually turn it over to our planning tech, Lev Simon, to give a little update, a little year-end roundup of City Plan Commission activities, and then an overview of the development status and outlook within the city.
Thank you, Bob. As this is the final meeting of the 2023 calendar year for the City Plan Commission, I would like to just do some year-end review stats. This year, the City Plan Commission has received 60 new cases, of which 33 are administrative subdivisions. Of the non-33 administrative subdivisions, 22 were minor applications, of which 16 were minor subdivisions and 4 were minor land development projects. In addition, there were 5 major applications, all of which were major land development projects, 2 of which were UDR. The CPC reviewed this year 16 minor subdivisions and 4 minor LDPs, and reviewed 8 major LDPs, 3 of which were received in the final months of 2022. As for city council referrals, the CPC reviewed 31 throughout various points of this year, 25 of which were zone change requests, 3 of which were changes or proposed changes to the text of the zoning ordinance, and another 3 of which were street abandonments in the city. There were 4 institutional master plans reviewed, those for Johnson and Wales, Brown, PC, and RISD. In addition, there were 2 updates to the development regulations, one of which will be tonight. There was 1 update to the comprehensive plan, 1 update to a campus development plan, and 1 update to an existing project, a major change. In your packet of stuff, there is a copy of a document containing a little bit more information on all of the residential projects that the CPC has approved this year. I'm not going to read them out in order, but you can peruse that if you so desire. At the master plan stage, throughout the entire calendar year, the CPC has approved 190 residential dwelling units. For the preliminary stage, again, throughout this entire calendar year, the CPC has reviewed and approved 183 residential dwelling units. That is in total, getting rid of the projects that went for both master and preliminary approval, 286 units, which also includes 2 from that major change that I mentioned earlier. There have also been a few non-residential projects, including a self-storage facility, a charter school, and a Montessori school. In addition, I want to speak just quickly on the general development pipeline for the city. These are projects that, by and large, the CPC has approved either this year or in prior years that are now under construction or awaiting the start of construction. As it stands, there are 67 such projects totaling well over 3,000 units, 3,318. Of those, 703 of those units, or 21.2%, are deed restricted affordable. In addition, there have been 679,726 square feet of commercial, a lot of which is self-storage, but a lot of which isn't. In addition, you can go down further into that appendix, that document I mentioned before. You can see a complete listing of all the projects that are in the pipeline. If you want to see those projects rendered graphically, you can check out the city's development mapper, which is present in our GIS services online, and you can scroll around and look at all the projects and see them rendered online. Thank you for listening. That's all I have.
Thank you, Liv. That was absolutely wonderful. I always appreciate the year-end wrap-up. I think we did that last year for the first time, and it's really quite remarkable to see it in totality. What comes before us, because we kind of see it on a month-by-month basis, and that's a really nice wrap-up for the year.
That's all for the director's report.
Okay, wonderful. So this evening, we're going to take a few things out of order. Just hang on one second. Okay, first of all, item number 7, minor subdivision, 53 Pomona Avenue, case number 23-054 UDR is being continued to the January 16th.
Yeah, January 16th. Yeah, you should take a vote on that.
At the request of the applicant?
That's
Okay.
right. We received a written request from the applicant.
Perfect, that's good. So let's just do some housekeeping and let's take a vote on the continuing of this matter to the January 16th meeting. If anyone would be so kind to make a motion.
Make a motion to continue,
I'll second.
Date specific.
to January 16th.
Perfect.
I'll second.
All right. We'll go around and do voice votes. Noel?
Aye.
Will? Charlotte?
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
And I vote aye. That matter is continued. We are going to go back to agenda item number 1, but then the rest of the items will be taken out of order. Again, we have an applicant who has a time constraint. So we're going to jump into the comprehensive plan update, and then we're going to go directly to agenda item numbers 4, 5, and 6. And then we will start back at number 2 again. So we're going to take 4, 5, and 6 first, and then we'll go back in order to hit all of the ones that we missed. With that, good to see you. Take it away.
Great, thank you for having us. So my name is Tim Shea. I'm the manager of engagement programs in the planning department. Can everyone hear us okay?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jess Lance. I'm the Director of Special Projects here in the Planning Department.
And if Bob's able to promote us, we should be able to project our slideshow. Okay, perfect. So yeah, thank you for having us. So as many of you are aware, we've been deep in the community engagement process for the comprehensive plan update, and it being the end of the year and us being at a change in our process moving into the next phase. I thought it would be a great chance to give you a status report, tell you about what we're finding in this engagement process. So I'm gonna go over the process first of all, talk about some of the key takeaways, and then I'll pass it over to my colleague Jess, who will talk about some of the policy directions that we're taking from that. So starting with the process, you know, as a once in a decade plan, it really calls for a very thorough and thoughtful engagement process. So we've been engaging people in the community since 2022, and we're trying to do it in a very iterative way where we bring people along in kind of the plan making process. So our first phase of engagement was focused more on listening, kind of identifying key issues and building awareness within the public. And now we're really in the meat of this process. We're at the end of this second phase here, where we've been using a variety of engagement methods in neighborhoods across the city to talk with people, to vision the city's future, to hear about challenges and brainstorm solutions. So we've been very deliberate in that we wanted to have a variety of methods, knowing that we need to meet people in their neighborhoods. Not everyone participates in the same way or is as comfortable participating in the process the same way. So we've used online, in-person meetings that have varied from workshops that we've hosted to meeting people at their neighborhood block parties and events. And so we're at the moment, we've done over 75 events around the city in the last 2 years. So this map here is 73. We've done a few since we made this map. But yeah, as I was referencing, that's a combination of going to community events around Providence and doing outreach to kind of build awareness of what the comprehensive plan is, to hear from people about how they see the city changing and some key challenges that they see. But we've also been having more in-depth conversations. We partnered with the Providence City Council to do a workshop in every ward in Providence that we completed this fall. We've also partnered with a variety of community organizations and institutions, from Providence Housing Authority to farmers markets around the city, to the Providence Student Union to engage youth in this process. So we've been really thoughtful about this and trying to identify communities, so-called hard to reach, but communities who we haven't engaged proactively in the past to target events there. In addition to that, we've had over 2,000 people participate online through surveys. So we've got a lot of beautiful photos from these events, and I just want to note that it's really been kind of an all department effort. We've had every planner in the department participating in events out in neighborhoods in some way. And as we get into some of our preliminary takeaways, we've broken this up today into kind of the visioning takeaways for the city, strengths and weaknesses, and then kind of priority issues and what we're hearing within those issue areas. So when it comes to visioning, in both our surveys and our workshops, we ask people questions like in the future, Providence should be blank, to try and get a sense of what the holistic vision is that we want to achieve. So more kind of playfully, visually, here's a bit of a word cloud, word salad with repeated phrases from these different methods. So terms like affordability, sustainable, green, walkable, clean, livable come up a lot for folks. We've taken the step for you to kind of try a first shot at organizing this into the themes that might form the introduction of our comprehensive plan. So yeah, future Providence that is affordable, addressing housing that we'll get into more in a moment, sustainable, connected, empowering with a lot of economic opportunity, a resilient economy, vibrant, beautiful, where sense of place and architecture is preserved, welcoming, sense of belonging for all, healthy, clean air, clean water, streets, homes. And as we kind of transition between visioning and the issues themselves, we've also asked people, what do you appreciate the most about our city? What makes it unique, and where's there room for improvement? So some of our open-ended questions, we did some analysis to create these buckets of kind of the most frequent terms and phrases. So people reference their neighborhoods, the community in those neighborhoods, the diversity in those neighborhoods, creativity, culture. The scale of Providence comes up a lot. People like Providence for being easy to get around, its walkability, its beauty, architecture, history, green spaces. And when we ask people what they want to see improved in Providence, housing affordability is the most frequently referenced theme that we'll get into in a moment. But our education system, educational opportunities in the city comes up a lot. Improving transportation links and connections and safety, green space, and then down specific issues related to downtown or neighborhoods in Providence. This is pretty broad, but to get bridge towards some of the specifics now, we're going to talk about some of the priority issues. So to really identify where there's opportunity for policy change, where people think we need policy change, we asked questions like, please prioritize this list of issues to tell us what you think needs to be addressed the most. And housing comes up right at the top of the list, and then transportation and kind of sustainability and climate come up close second and third. And so we've decided to dive into those three issues here today and kind of what we're hearing in those issues. So on housing, a few takeaways. I think, it's really hard to understate the ways that the housing crisis is affecting people in neighborhoods across the city. There's clear kind of demand for action on housing across demographic spectrum. So when we compare between, from your Ward 2s to your Ward 15s to a variety of different kind of neighborhoods with different communities in them, housing comes up at the top of the list in all those places. We're seeing in our survey results and in other forms that there's a lot of support for pursuing affordability in all neighborhoods in the city, more opportunities for affordability, and that there's kind of openness and support for more diverse housing types and density and more infill and vacant lots. So lastly here, just, a few concerns that we hear around housing that come up a lot are the impacts of student housing in particular neighborhoods, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a moment. And then just the design quality of the new builds in Providence. So here we just have, from our survey, we provided some statements and asked people agree, disagree questions. So higher density should be allowed in new housing development to relieve pressure on rents and home prices. Nearly about 70% are on the agree side of the spectrum. Affordable housing should be encouraged in every neighborhood in Providence. About 70% strongly agree. And then moving on to transportation, a few takeaways here. How easy it is to get around Providence is routinely ranked in the top issues of, or in what you, when we ask people what you value about a neighborhood, how easy it is to get around comes up really high. So transportation is very important to people. And then when we get into what do you want transportation policy to prioritize, what comes up at the top is encouraging transportation alternatives. So encouraging public transit, encouraging walking and biking, improving the quality of public transit. And the things that are kind of driving these attitudes are things like safety, climate emissions, people's concerns about public health as well come up. And then moving into this last topic area here, climate, I think, probably a big difference 2014 to today. There's definitely a lot of awareness about climate change in 2014, but when we were meeting people at neighborhood events, they were often citing a recent extreme weather event in their neighborhood and kind of talking about how it affects them. So it's really clearly a top priority when we ask people for kind of their ideas around how we lower emissions. A lot of suggestions focus on decarbonizing transportation, energy, encouraging net zero building. When we talk about resilience and how we are preparing for these storms, there's a lot of talk about methods for absorbing water, about how we bring down temperatures in neighborhoods, so greening, depaving, and also kind of an equity lens here about how we prioritize investments in the communities that we think of as underserved frontline communities that are likely to bear the brunt of a lot of climate impacts. And then lastly, before I hand it over to Jess to talk about some policy directions, there are a lot of nuanced topics that come up in this process. And we pulled out a few neighborhood specific topics that we thought were really prominent that came up repeatedly. So student housing, especially, we have kind of 3 hubs of student housing in the city, and how this affects not only quality of life, but also affects like the local rental market in that neighborhood came up a lot. The proximity of industry and highways to neighborhoods came up, and how it impacts kind of the air that people breathe in and that they smell, the general quality of life. Connectivity, especially certain neighborhoods highlighting that highways or really unsafe roads kind of disconnect them from the rest of the city or make them feel like they don't have access to opportunity in different ways. And then we've talked a little bit here already about paving, parking lots, and lack of green space that came up in specific neighborhoods where they feel like they don't have a lot of green assets. And then the last point here is just around social services. So certain neighborhoods in the city that bring up the fact that they feel that there's a concentration of a lot of social services in particular areas of the city, and that can really affect sense of safety and quality of life and just kind of the sense of community in neighborhoods. So those are some of our takeaways thus far. I'll pass this over to Jess.
Thank you, Tim. So as we are sort of getting into this next phase of the comp plan update and starting to draft the actual content that we'll be sharing back with you in the coming months, I just wanted to go in using all of that feedback that Tim just went through, sort of some of the thinking behind some of the new policy recommendations that we might be drafting that you might be seeing. So when we're talking about housing, going back to housing and housing affordability being sort of the top issue citywide, regardless of demographic or neighborhood, we're seeing a lot of appetite for newer, denser development, really accelerating production of new housing and especially affordable housing in neighborhoods citywide. Some of the policy directions that we've been discussing with folks out in the community include, changes to land use and density Where is there housing today that maybe doesn't align with, or what are some of the regulations around housing that don't align with, what's on the ground today? Allowing new housing typologies, particularly around ADUs and other kinds of sort of that missing middle housing that's not like super high rise, but is denser than maybe a single family. Making sure that we are accessing and utilizing all sources of funds available to support the development of housing. Working either with property owners or as the city to acquire vacant or blighted properties for redevelopment and make sure that all the land in the city is being used at the highest and best use possible. We've heard continued streamlining of the development permitting processes, which I know the CPC has been heavily involved in and has been, doing an excellent job at that. And so I think, people want to see more of that, keep going. And then addressing the inflationary impacts of student housing on rental market. So how can we sort of help to limit that impact so that our families in Providence can afford to live here as well? And then, while there's that appetite for more housing, denser housing, how are we making sure that we're reusing buildings that exist, particularly our mills and our bigger buildings? And making sure that design standards are incentivized so that the buildings that are coming online are of highest quality and design. When we get into land use, sort of everything, right, touches land use. So again, we're hearing a lot of appetite for more dense commercial, mixed use and residential spaces, making sure that there are amenities like parks and walkability, and then, along with denser buildings, larger buildings, refining height incentives to encourage affordability and make sure that the design aligns with street activation in the neighborhood. And then sort of looking at specific areas within the city that maybe, again, the zoning is maybe R2 and yet on the ground, it's mostly R3. So how can we tweak the zoning regulations to allow what's on the ground today to be legally built? Making sure that we're preserving our industrial uses and not necessarily giving it up to too much housing or other uses to make sure that we have enough land available for continued economic opportunity and make sure that we're balancing the needs right for people living here and also working here. And then another point that we're hearing a lot, particularly around the port and the waterfront, is understanding that the waterfront in Providence is a working waterfront and will maintain its character as a working waterfront, but how can we encourage cleaner and greener uses while also sort of working with companies to make sure that, public health and green space and recreation is also thought of throughout. When we're talking about mobility, Tim mentioned, citywide, regardless of neighborhood, there's an appetite for reduced dependency on the automobile and making it easier to get around the city, not in a car. There's a lot of emphasis on public transit, which of course we don't necessarily control, but we can work with RIPTA to make it easier for, bus lanes or that kind of thing. Making sure that it's safe and convenient, regardless of what mode of transportation someone is using. Aligning our own mobility aspirations with adopted state and federal plans, including the bicycle mobility plan and the transit master plan, and making sure that we're moving all of those desires forward. And then making sure when we're talking about mobility and transportation that climate and public health are really sort of at the forefront of the policies to make it cleaner and safer and easier to get around. And I think we're all pretty aware that the EVs are here and will continue to increase in use. And so making sure that we are encouraging charging infrastructure and whatever other infrastructure we need to encourage more EV use. And then finally, planning for carbon emissions and everything that we're doing, particularly around transportation and building, making sure that the policies within the comp plan align with existing plans like the climate justice plan, and particularly the state act on climate. So are we all moving in the same direction as the rest of our partners in the state in reducing our emissions? Making sure we're incorporating best practices and low impact design in building siting, design and energy standards. Stormwater management has become a huge issue, obviously, throughout the city. So while we've got new buildings coming online, how are we making sure that developers are managing stormwater on site? And then, being resilient to the climate effects that we're seeing today. And how do we preserve and protect nature in the city? Because we know that it's a huge public health impact, making sure that our residents have access to nature for public and mental health. And then making sure that any of those climate resilience investments are going to more of our disadvantaged frontline communities, and we're doing it in an equitable way. So as we get further into the drafting, we'll get more specific, but these are just sort of the things that we've got in our minds as we're going through and updating regulation or recommendations. And so our next steps, as we get through the holidays, we'll be drafting a more robust engagement report and sort of a draft growth strategy that we're working with the mayor's office as well, bringing all of this back to the administration to publicize sort of that direction that we're headed in for additional community feedback, make sure we're headed in the right direction. And then in the spring, we plan to have various sections of the plan sort of coming to you all so that you all have a chance to read it. And we're making sure that, again, we're sharing things back to the community as well. And then, the formal process with CPC official approval and recommendation and city council and state reviews will happen sort of in the later half of 2024. So that's where we are, and I think we'll open it up to any questions that you all might have at this point.
Yeah, so this is an informational presentation to us, the City Plan Commission. There's been plenty of public engagement through this, and Tim and Jess have made themselves abundantly available to the public. So this is now a time where they're giving us an update. They're here to answer any of your questions related to the comprehensive plan and the next steps. And there will be further meetings at the City Plan Commission where public comment will be taken. But right now it's for you guys. If you have any questions for Tim and Jess, I've had the pleasure of being at a few of the meetings, and that you guys did an absolutely wonderful job. The tools that you used for engaging the audience and garnering participation, I was really impressed. I thought it was a really well done, and I appreciate the efforts.
Thank you very much.
Any questions of Tim and Jess before they take off?
One thing that comes up, is there currently any design review in the comp plan as it is now?
Yeah, so I may throw that one over to our Deputy Director, Bob.
Yeah, so we, there is a section of the comp plan currently, called the built environment, and we intend that there will continue to be. That's primarily where we talk about historic preservation and other types of regulation that impact the look and feel and function of the built environment. And with respect to design review, certainly that's something that happens a lot in historic districts. It happens a lot in downtown. And then, when it comes to other projects that get reviewed through other processes, not as much. We do have some design regulations in the zoning ordinance that are mandatory. But design review sometimes can be a process that's a little bit more subjective. Zoning is supposed to be as objective as possible. So we have to kind of walk a fine line there. But I do think that there could be some opportunities for looking a little bit more at design. We talked a little bit in the previous meetings about the development review regulations, where when developers are asking for additional, asking for something discretionary, the dimensional adjustments that you give or waivers or things like that, we've now included some language that gives you a little bit more purview over the design of the building. So, you're not a design review committee, you won't be strictly a design review committee, maybe you don't wanna be. But that is definitely, the more that developers are asking for, the more you're gonna have some flexibility with respect to that. I think there's also some things that we can probably do a little bit more at the staff level. We do already, before things even come to you, we talk a lot to developers about the building and the look and not just how it fits with the regulations, but sometimes we get into aesthetics. But certainly that's a conversation we're happy to have more of.
I think I just bring it up because I've been in some of the meetings that were pretty interesting.
They were.
And I think that's what I'm hearing in the public, right? And from people I talk to about, and being here for a year and some months now, kind of what the neighbors bring to this meeting. A lot of it seems, well, I don't know if a lot, but a good bit of it seems to be, the design. And I know that I don't want to review design. I'm not particularly, don't know if I'm qualified, but I think that the issue that I hear in the presentation, that's what I think is people are asking for.
They're asking to make it easier while,
To give an opinion or.
easier to permit, more housing. And also, so there's like a tug and a pull there, and it's gonna be the planning department's Herculean effort to try and pull this together as a draft and hit all of the points that were brought, and I look forward to looking at that. Charlie, you had some questions?
Yeah, I'm wondering if any attention has been paid to the types of incentives offered in other cities' zoning or comprehensive plans, that address some of these issues, particularly I think the climate, ones. I think right now we have incentives around mixed use and parking, but from the presentation now, and my sense from being here for a little while is that those might not be the right incentives, or the most important ones maybe. And I'm wondering if there's been analysis of what other cities are doing to incentivize.
Like green buildings,
Yeah.
EV infrastructure, things like that, that's also talked about in this as a goal. Yeah, that's a good question. Maybe a point to take back and mull over.
Yeah, I think that's something that we can take back as a recommendation from you as CBC, to look at a little bit more. I feel like we can have a goal of, kind of a vague recommendation about looking into that, but then it would get into more of the zoning and land use specific ordinances about what specifically that would look like, but it's definitely a point well taken that we can look back at, yeah.
And I think Charlotte's talking about like in development incentives. People ask us for certain things, extra height, extra, lower parking, things like that, where we have a little bit more flexibility, and maybe if there was some thought to, climate or sustainability in those incentives.
Yeah, I think I was just getting at the point that the comp plan is not where you get into specifics
Right.
about those kinds of regulations. It comes a little bit
It's
later.
like the mission statement.
You're right, exactly. Yeah, it's one of the recommendations to look into those like incentives paired with climate goals, right? And then that would go into the further design or other regulations.
Yeah, just to follow up, I think, specifically, there are a bunch of ways to do this, but I think there are communities that have involved, passive house or net zero certification as part of an incentive program to get extra height or density.
Right.
Which seems like it hits two goals.
Right. And that, I guess, what you're saying is that that's more of a takeaway after the comp plan is drafted for us to.
Well, yeah, yes and no,
but I think it's-
I think we can point the direction in the comp plan itself.
Okay.
And I do think, that you're right, that the incentive structure we have today is definitely due for a reevaluation.
Anyone else on the commission? We'll be seeing more of them, so don't worry. And anyone in the public who has questions, the email address was up there. You can feel free to email them It's planning at.
Yeah, planning at providenceri.gov is a good spot to send any questions.
If you have any questions, comments, or input to the comprehensive plan, again, there will be more public meetings here and at the city council over the next year, before it's adopted and approved and goes through all of the regulatory process. But it's an ongoing discussion that we will continue to have updates from planning staff around. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, with that, we'll move right into the next agenda item. Again, we're taking them a little bit out of order. So we're gonna jump to agenda item number 4. That was agenda item number 1. So we're gonna jump to agenda item number 4, which is a referral, city council referral 3561. It's for 15 Farmington Avenue. After this, we'll take agenda items 5 and 6, and then we'll go back in order to hit the ones we've missed. So this is city council referral, agenda item number 4, referral number 3561, 15 Farmington Avenue.
All right, thanks, Mr. Chair, and a quick introduction before we hear from the petitioner. So this is a request from a zone change from R2 to C3. And if you look at the zoning map as well as the future land use map, you'll see that this is one where you have a lot of heavy industrial businesses like auto body in proximity to residential uses as well as the residential zone. And if you look at the history of this property, you will see that it has been used as auto detailing as well as an auto body business for a number of years, but came to be located in the R2 zone. And so the applicant is requesting a zone change to C3 in order to make those uses conforming. And I guess the petitioner can tell you more about the use of the site and what they intend to do with the zone change.
John.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, John Garrahy on behalf of the petitioner Albanese Irrevocable Trust in this case, and thank you for the courtesy of allowing me to speak now. This one is, as was talked about in the comprehensive plan, some of the properties are not in zones of which they are allowed. This is one of them. This property was originally in a C4 zone when these commercial industrial buildings were constructed. It was changed without, as I understand it, the owner's consent to an R3 zone. So essentially making their uses non-conforming, which severely restricts what they can do on these properties. Although the detailing shop is non-conforming because it was there before the change, the auto body shop was not. So essentially those uses are stuck in time and the owner can't do anything else other than those uses. Makes it particularly difficult, particularly where they want to do something different because there's been some congestion with respect to the tenants of those operations, with respect to parking and things of that nature. So really what's being sought here is to allow them to be able to have the use of that commercial R3 zone and to have more the opportunity to have those uses and have other uses rather than restricted. The auto body shop is not allowed there. It needs a license to operate, and that's one of the reasons for the zone change. So it would appear that this was changed after the commercial structures were built, again, severely restricting the ownership and the use of those properties. That's the purpose of the zone change, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Attorney Garrahy. Commissioners, do you have any questions of the applicant? All right, let's hear the staff report on this one.
Sure, thanks, Mr. Chair. And as discussed, if you look at the zoning ordinance as well as the future land use map of the plan, you'll see that this area is one that's intended for heavy commercial to be up against residential uses. However, in order to make that finding, you do need to find that those uses can exist in harmony. And so when we visited the site, as well as when you look at street view and things like that, you will see conditions like cars parked on the sidewalk, trash on the lot, which kind of detract from the harmony and character of the neighborhood. So we do find that based on the future land use map, this could be a use that exists on the site, provided the petitioner takes certain steps in order to better integrate this site into the surrounding neighborhood. And you are also required to make a finding with section 101 of the ordinance to show that there will not be a negative effect on health, safety, and welfare, and we feel that this can be achieved with some improvements to the site. And like we've said, those could include things like making sure that there are no cars parked on the sidewalk, removal of trash, and also meeting the canopy coverage requirement by planting of trees either on the lot or in the vicinity, given that this site is fully paved. So based on that, we would recommend that you make a positive recommendation to the city council with the condition that the applicant demonstrate the steps that they're gonna take to better integrate the site into the surrounding.
I'm gonna open this up to public comment. Before I do, Attorney Garrity, would you care to comment on the staff recommendations or in general, the condition of the property?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, certainly. So there are two tenants on the property. The owner would really like to be able to clean it up, and as a matter of fact, has started eviction proceedings with respect to one of the tenants that is causing the congestion. So there was really an attempt to really clean it up. But if the tenant that's there, the detailing shop leaves, he couldn't essentially put any other tenant in there because of the restrictions on the non-conforming use. They would have abandoned that use and been limited to the R3 zone, which is primarily residential. So there is certainly no objection to the staff conditions, and it's something that the owner wants to do himself.
Well, that's good to hear. We do have a member of the city council in attendance this evening, so I hope that he remembers that if this gets forwarded to the city council for their review.
We'll bring it to their attention as well, Mr. Chairman, at the public hearing.
All right, this is a public hearing, so if there is anyone in our physical audience who cares to comment on this matter, or if you're joining us in the virtual world, press *9 or raise your virtual hand in the middle bottom section of your screen. And seeing none, we will close the public comment portion of this agenda item. Okay, commissioners.
So just, could you clarify what it is and what it's gonna become? There's a couple different notations in the notes, R3 or R2. Both are mentioned that it is right now.
So the actual zoning of the site is R3, and it's one lot. It's a through lot between let me just point this out here. It's this lot here. Note that there are a couple of adjacent lots that in the aerial photos have a lot of vehicles parked on them. They are not the subject of this rezoning. The lot here has been developed for housing. There's a house on that property right now. So some of the autos that are sort of parked willy-nilly on the unpaved surfaces, that's gone because there's now a house there. So it's just this one lot that would go from R3 to C4, which is the lot that's directly
C3,
across. I'm sorry, C3, which is the zone that's directly across the street. And by the way, I know Mr. Garrett, you made representations that the city rezoned this property. I have not been able to personally verify that. I don't know where that information is coming from, but maybe John can follow up with me at a later date and let me know where you got that information from, because I wasn't aware of that. With any rezoning.
Let me just address that, Bob, just very quickly. It was C4 originally based on the letter from Merlin DeConte it was C4. Obviously, the original buildings were non-conforming. They would not have been allowed in the R3 zone.
Well, again, I've not seen a
Okay.
zoning map that shows that, but I mean, regardless, I think we're looking forward. You know, at what's the right zoning for this use? And C3 is the right zoning for this use.
Agreed. I do have the same concern as the staff, seeing as it's a natural area for commercial, but there's also residential in close proximity, abutting adjacent to this parcel. I just want to make sure they're good neighbors.
Is C3 limiting to what the kinds of use it could become? And does this auto body shop conform to that?
Yeah, it would be
It's an allowed
permitted by.
use in C3, and it's the lower dense, lower impact, commercial zone.
No, it's actually the highest.
Oh, it's the highest.
Yeah, that's the one where we allow the,
Oh, because auto body
Auto-related
is
uses.
only allowed in C3.
Yeah.
So would we want a footnote?
I don't think
like
so
footnotes.
necessarily. I mean, that's about as intensive as it gets in the C3 zone.
And it's surrounded by C3.
But I just understand, so if it gets changed, then it's other things can go into those buildings, other businesses.
I don't have the,
Yes, a restaurant, an office,
Yeah,
and so forth, but vehicle dealership repair and service is probably the most intensive use that would be allowed in the C3 zone. So if they wanted to change the use to something else, including residential, I think we'd be fine with it.
okay.
But so this allows them to continue the operation. And honestly, I'm not sure why they're asking for this. John, have they been cited?
Yeah, yes. The short answer is yes. The license, the auto body shop cannot operate because it's not properly zoned for that.
Right. They've been denied a license from the licensing board. So the licensing board does have oversight over the way the operation is run. They will have to go to the licensing board, and neighbors will get notice of that hearing if they can get through the rezoning steps.
Attorney Gary, you may know this or you may not. How often does the license come up for renewal or review? Or is it something that can be, if there's a concern about the operation, is that something that can be addressed by this licensing authority?
It's an annual license, but normally they wouldn't come up unless there's some type of an incident. In this case, the operator let it lax, and therefore it came to the attention of the licensing board, and the review was that it was not in a zone that allowed for the use.
Understood. So there are some safeguards there.
all right, so just to get back to my original.
It's
On
currently
this paper
R3.
here, it says rezoning from R2 to C3, just. to make
That's
a
an error.
correction for the
Yeah.
minutes.
Yeah.
You correctly.
So rezoning from R3, the request, the petition, and the staff report does say R3.
Yes.
It's just that cover page. R3 to C3. Okay. Anything else?
What is currently it looks like sort of at the corner of that block, there's some C3, and then there's one parcel in between this one and that. What's on that parcel?
Yeah, Bob has it pulled up right here.
My question being, are we
Walking.
marooning or, creating a,
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. But, it's another, it's a business,
okay, it's not a
it's-
residence.
No, it's a business office. Yeah. I mean, which should
That's an
also,
insurance business.
it should be in a commercial zone, but it's not.
Very commercial.
This is not unusual to find something that is not properly zoned as the zoning board was, you know, the de facto decider on land use for many decades.
By giving use variances instead of.
By giving use variances instead of rezonings, yeah.
Anything else? Any other questions? I'm comfortable making the recommendation as laid out.
So moved.
I'll second.
All right, we'll go around for a voice vote. Noel,
Aye.
Will,
Aye.
Charlotte,
Aye.
Dave,
Aye.
and I vote aye. Moving along to the next agenda item. Again, we're going out of order, in order, so to speak. We are moving along to agenda item number 5. It's also a city council referral, 3564. It is regarding 355 Thurbers Avenue.
Sure, thanks, Mr. Chair. And this is currently a vacant lot, the site of a former industrial building. And the applicant is requesting a zone change from C2 to C3 to allow for a car wash use on that site. And the car wash use is permitted with a special use permit in the C3 zone. And the petition does request that the car wash use be permitted by right, that a note be added to allow it by right on this site. So I guess the applicant's here and they can tell us more about the request.
Attorney Garrity, back to you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, thank you. John Garrahy on behalf of the applicant and the owner. Mr. Francisco Cruz, I think, is in the audience there, and maybe we'll step up as well to give his point of view with respect to this project. So essentially, this is a commercial zone, Thurbers near Broad Street, next to the CVS, which was an industrial building for a long time. The proposed use is a car wash. We're asking for that use because we know what it is. So although it's permitted by special use permit, because we know of it, we're saying that's the use that we want to put there. We believe it to be an appropriate use for this area. I know the staff has a different opinion on that, but it's a car wash. It's a good use for that commercial area. There are C zones right around there. So we believe it to be entirely appropriate and consistent with the area and a good use for the location. So I would ask you to allow Mr. Cruz and the owner of the property to address you as well.
Cruz, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, it used to be a wiring manufacturing building. It was non-use. So it's building was torn down.
Speaking of the microphone, yeah, just make sure you speak in the microphone. Thank you.
Alright, so the building was torn down. I want to add that some of the lots that were cut off was sold to swap. So creating more housing.
Mhm.
Then I created jobs.
All right.
And Mr. Cruz, you could talk about your experience. You've developed car washes, so you have some experience in the development of car washes.
Correct. So I currently own one in East Providence. It's a state of the art. I'm actually the first one to bring that kind of machinery to Rhode Island. All stainless steel. The detergents that I use, reusing the water, not all of it, but but for the most part, reusing the water. And it's a great system, especially over there that, it would be something good for the community.
This is something you'd anticipate would be open 24/7?
No, 8 to 8. That's what I do in East Providence now. 8 to 8.
Commissioners, do you have questions of the applicant? Or the petitioner in this case?
How many employees are usually working at one of these, this type of?
And the one in East Providence, I have 9.
So this is like a manned operation where,
It's a tunnel car wash, but because, I like customer service, I always have people on, 3 people at a time, at a shift.
any other questions?
Is there a concern with traffic impact, traffic study at all? The amount of cars coming through?
Not really, there's enough traffic there that, with an empty lot, that it is what it is. It's not gonna create more traffic. If anything, I would alleviate a little bit, you know what I mean? Because if you're stuck in traffic, you might wanna wash your car while some of that traffic eases. That's what happens in East Providence.
So you're saying you're mostly a pass-by traffic destination, you're not a destination, you're pulling cars off the road that are passing by already.
I do monthlies, you know, whoever's around that wants to get a wash. And mind you, I pay a lot of taxes and I know you like that.
We do like to bolster our tax base here.
Oh my
Yeah.
God, I pay a lot of taxes. A lot.
Will the facility go through to Colfax Street?
No,
So the drive through?
and then when they're done, they can just leave out.
Any other commissioners have questions of the applicant? Okay, let's,
What are the,
go ahead.
no, the applicant.
Okay, let's hear the staff report and then we can take public comment on this one.
All right, I'll give the staff report on this one. So, your fundamental charge is to evaluate every zoning change with respect to the comprehensive plan. And the most important section of the comprehensive plan when it comes to zoning is the land use section. And the most important aspect of the land use section when it comes to the zoning map is the future land use map. So I'm gonna draw your attention to that map. This is the zoning map. This is showing the parcel here, which is zone C2. And the, whoops, oh gosh, let's do that. All right, so here's the future land use map, and here's the area in question. This is Thurbers Avenue. This is just north of Thurbers Avenue. And right here, we've got this designation called neighborhood commercial and mixed use. And you see that we basically got two levels of commercial designation in this future land use map. This one here, the darker red, is called general commercial mixed use. That's the one that corresponds with the higher intensity commercial zone, the C3 zone. This paler red color corresponds with the C1 and the C2 zones. This neighborhood commercial mixed use is described as areas characterized by traditional pedestrian and transit-oriented uses that serve local neighborhood needs for convenience, retail, services, professional offices, and housing. Buildings are set close to the street with entrances and facades oriented towards the street. Residential uses are encouraged. So that's the designation that corresponds with the C1 and the C2 zones. So the zoning is perfectly consistent with this designation. In our opinion, in order for this to be zoned C3, you would need a higher level of intensity allowed by the comprehensive plan. That could be the general commercial mixed use designation, or even the business mixed use designation, which corresponds roughly with some of our industrial zones. That's where we allow the auto-oriented uses. So whenever there's a zoning change proposed, we always tell you this, that this map is not meant for parcel level analysis. There can be a little bit of wiggle room in terms of where zoning changes can happen. If they're on the border between two districts, we say that the zoning can change there. Within the residential zones, you have a range of different kinds of residential zoning that can happen. And again, within the commercial, you have a range, but it's the lower intensity commercial zones, not the higher intensity. So for that reason, our finding is that this would be inconsistent with the comprehensive plan, specifically with the future land use map. And we don't believe that the city council has the authority to make this zoning change. So that's why we're recommending to you that you advise the council to deny the application.
All right, that's a good summary. This is a public hearing, so we will open it up to public comment at this time. If there's anyone in our physical audience who wishes to be heard on this matter, please raise your hand or come forward now. Okay, we'd ask the applicant to go ahead and sit back down. And again, if you're joining us in the audience and you wish to be heard on this matter, please raise your virtual hand or press *9 if you're calling in. And sir, just state your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, my name is Gregory Costantino, 21 Greenwood Lane, Lincoln, Rhode Island. I am the owner of 355 Thurbers Ave. I just wanted to add to the conversation that if you're traveling west down Thurbers Avenue, past this particular lot, there's a large industrial building, 40,000 square feet, that is currently vacant right now. If you travel a little further, there's an auto sales on the corner of Prairie and Thurbers. Next to the auto sales, you have a body shop. Next to that, there's another body shop. So there is some C3 uses that are in that area. Across the street from the site, obviously, as you were talking, there is some housing that's being developed. I sold some lots to swap the last couple of weeks, so she could develop some housing in that area. And I just wanted to add that. So as you're traveling down, there are a bunch of different uses of that general area. There's a gas station on the corner of Eddie and Thurbers. So Burger King across the street, and then obviously it's Rhode Island School for the deaf is on that other corner. So I just wanted to make the board aware of that information.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else here in the audience who wishes to speak on this matter or in our virtual world? Seeing none, we will close the public comment portion of this agenda item.
Do we know if those other, I know the lots he's talking about on,
Yeah,
Thurbers down the road,
are those all C2?
no,
Exist?
well, there's, according to the map, they're non-conforming uses.
Yeah, they're C2, they're in the C2 or even the C1 zone.
So they're existing non-conforming.
Yeah, they again may be by variance.
Right.
This is the problem. You know, we have departures from the zoning ordinance all over the place. And we don't think that those departures should be justification for further departures. Unless the plan commission and the council feel that this should be redesignated. You know, if you and the council feel that Thurbers Avenue itself should be an area that should accommodate these kinds of much more heavy commercial uses, then that's a recommendation you could make, and that's a vote the council could take.
We have one of the biggest public schools there on the other side of the street, like,
Yeah,
with a lot of kids walking through there all the time. Evening and morning.
Yep.
I know that section of Thurbers is pretty dead right now as far as activity, but I'm not sure if this use would be.
Well, I think the issue that Bob raises is valid. Our charge is to
Further the problem.
is to investigate and to recommend, and the investigation leads to that this intended use does not does not jive with the future land use map, which means
And is the pharmacy next door, the CVS, is that?
a
How
pharmacy
does that
probably is allowed.
Pharmacy fits in with both, well, the C2, for the size, typically, C1 is typically for smaller, commercial, properties, but that is in conformance with the C2, but for, some variances that the zoning board granted years ago for setback and things like that, parking. But as a use, the CVS conforms to the C2.
And,
Sorry, go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say, it doesn't look from the maps that have been shown, like this is a vacant parcel, but I'm assuming the building that
The
was.
building has been demolished
Okay.
since a lot of the aerials and street view images have been taken.
Got it.
And it's all residential across the street or not, zoning wise.
Yes, it's R3 residential across the street. And again, plenty of nonconformity.
That doesn't mean we need to further the non-conformity. I think I'm in agreement with that. I mean, again, we're not making a decision here. We're recommending to the city council. They'll make the ultimate decision. But I do believe that the future land use is very clear, and we can't make a positive recommendation to the city council because of that. City council may act on their own to approve the change, but I think as a planning board, we should be tied to our duty, which is to refer to the future land use and zoning in the comprehensive plan. So now would be the time to make a motion if anyone cares to do so.
I'll make the motion then.
Thank
We
you.
propose to the city council to deny the change.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, go around. We'll do a voice vote. Noel?
Aye.
Will?
Aye.
Charlotte?
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Moving right along, we will move to agenda item number 6. Which is case number 23-055 MI. It's a minor land development project, 150 to 158 Pitman Street.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So this is a request for the preliminary plan approval of a minor land development project that would be located at the site of what is 150 to 158 Pitman Street. 3 lots that will be merged for the subject development. So the applicant is planning to demolish the existing building and construct a 5-story multifamily with 16 units and internal parking. The site is zoned C2. And they do require a dimensional adjustment that they're asking for in the amount of to provide a height of 57 feet and 5 stories, where 4 stories and 50 feet are permitted by right. So the parking will be provided internally, and the applicant will be walking you through the rest of the development, as well as talking about the roof and other appurtenances. So the applicant's here and they can tell you more about the project.
Thank you.
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Chairman. John, Gary,
Yes.
is also with us. John, why don't you start us off?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, John Garrahy on behalf of the applicant. As I always say, with respect to these projects, they should be conforming. This is a conforming project almost entirely. It's entirely appropriate for the area. It's going to take a existing 3 unit with parking lots and turn it into a magnificent 5-story, 16-unit structure with parking underneath. And I will say, I spent the weekend in my new home away from home in Washington, D.C. And, you know, and I now take a look at the structures and the residences that are around. And this is the model. The model is structured parking in a city. We are a city. You put the parking within it, you take it off of the outside lots, you put it within it, you have 16 units. The incentive zoning is working here. You provide an additional story for the structured parking, and you have a terrific structure in an entirely appropriate area. There are other apartment buildings over here which have a similar look to this. The Delano is right next door. This is going to complement that and be something in addition to it, a similar type of structure. And I will say, and I know we've had some discussions about the rooftop before, but as I say, being in Washington, DC, and looking at the buildings that are there, the rooftop does add an amenity that people are looking for, particularly with this type of a project. And it's important to provide that type of an amenity. So I'll let our team make the presentation, but again, I would say this is a tremendous addition to this area, entirely appropriate, adding 16 units, getting rid of off-street parking and putting it within the building. So Joe, I'd let you make the presentation.
Thank you, John. So first of all, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Just for the record, my name's Joe Casali. I'm a registered professional engineer with offices at 300 Post Road in Warwick. With me is Oscar Ramirez. We've been here before you before. Oscar is the registered architect with Aharonian and Associates, and also Bill Lavery is here with me as well. If I may, Mr. Chairman, quickly go through, as always, the PowerPoint presentation. And maybe we can answer a lot of your questions. So where are we in terms of the city? Wayland Avenue, Butler, and there is Pitman Street. And specifically, assessors plat 15, lots 238, 239, and 240, which is 150, 154, and 158 Pitman Street. You can see, as Attorney Garrahy said, there's an existing 3-story, 2-family dwelling that's predominantly on lot 240 that's proposed to be raised. That's a picture of the Delano next door with the 3-story. And there it is again in the blue. You know, if we are allowed and we are to merge these 3 lots, we would end up with one parcel slightly short of 13,000 square feet. Understanding the 0 to 5 build to zone in our zone, as well as the 10-foot residential side yard setback, we would propose, in terms of a footprint, about 9,200 square feet. With the multiple stories, 5, it'll be a total of 44,000 square feet. And again, as Attorney Garrahy said, 5-story, 16-unit residential structure. The one element, while this is by right, we are asking for a dimensional adjustment for the 1 additional story, and that is because of the provision with the structured parking. There's a great rendering that Oscar and his team did of the building. Again, as Attorney Garrahy suggested, extremely attractive in terms of the permanence of materials. But let's look at the program on the entrance at Pitman Street, both the entrance lobby and the gymnasium, the elevator that you'll see on all of the floors, as well as trash on all of the floor levels. Utilities, and then again, Mr. Chairman, the structured parking. So 16 spaces, 1 per unit, comporting in terms of 16 total spaces. 1 is ADA accessible. And then in terms of bike storage, 1 per every 5. So we have 4 spaces also in that ground level for bikes. The typical level, 2, 3, 4, 5 are all predominantly the same. That main elevator chase is going to allow 4 2-bedroom units. They range anywhere from close to 1,700 square feet to slightly larger than 2,100 square feet. All of them will have balconies, again, trash amenity. And then on the final rooftop level, predominantly outdoor space, though a little less than half of it, Mr. Chairman, is reserved for additional mechanical utility areas that we need to address. And then in terms of elevation, as Shoyan said, we're asking for one additional story. Code is 50 feet. We're at 57. Code is at 4 levels. We're at 5. You see the Pitman Street elevation on the south, the east elevation, and also the west. And that is a good shot of the Delano building next door, and how we think that this will fit in nicely with that, as well as the Premier, which is across the street. Again, slightly larger at about 64 feet, but within natural character of the area. In terms of utilities or landscaping, we understand 15% or around 1,900 square feet of tree canopy. We will exceed that. We're gonna have the existing street tree to remain, put in a second one with a tree well, give us the 2,000 square feet so we can exceed that code in terms of landscaping. And then utilities, a little bit of a twist here. In terms of water, very simple, domestic and fire protection. It's same with sewer, the sewer connection. But the lot to the north, Assessor's Plat 15, lot 250, currently has their gas connection that runs through our parcel. We're gonna just need to relocate that, but keep that existing service. And then our proposed gas service to our utility. Same thing with underground electric to our transformer location. And then the same thing happens with drainage. Oddly enough, lot 250 drainage passes southerly to Pitman Street. We're gonna keep that intact, just need to relocate it out of our building footprint and then have our own individual underground injection control system so we can attenuate peaks and reduce volumes as well. And you can see that's a good look at the stormwater in terms of both peak runoff rates are contained in all of the relative storms, and then the total volume is also reduced. So lastly, wrapping up, Mr. Chairman, where are we in terms of the process? We were here before you just a few months ago in September. We did schedule a Ward 1 community meeting in November. We ran out of time. We were not heard. We've made everybody aware, at least I hope we have, of tonight's meeting. And we had our interdepartmental review the day after that on November 28th. And again, we're here before you tonight for a minor land development review. If you were to approve that tonight, we still would ask for contingencies. We need to file applications with DEM for that groundwater discharge permit, the Bay Commission, Providence Water, and we'll be back coordinating with engineering and traffic as well as the city forester or the landscape provisions. Oscar and I, as well as John, Mr. Chairman, are here to answer questions of you, members of the commission or the public if they are if they so desire.
Okay, thank you very much. Attorney Gary, I didn't really remember that being your catchphrase, but I'm gonna hold you to it. Should be conforming. I like that. And if that's the case, bringing us conforming projects, you're gonna see a lot less of us and a lot more of Bob and Choi on come January 1st.
I think so, Mr. Chairman, let me just address that. But I think conforming is right, but the incentive zoning is important, which is included in the ordinance that you say, look, if you give us structured parking, we'll give you another story. I think that's extremely important and technically maybe not conforming, but it encourages the structured parking and the mixed use. So that's the one exception I'll make.
Well, that leads to my next comment is I think this is an absolutely appropriate place for density. It's right across from East Side Market. There's residential buildings up and down this. You better hope the 195 bridge is fixed before you guys start construction. It's going to be a pass through until then.
Right.
But yeah, I have no issues with increased density on this. This is actually looks like an absolutely appropriate project for this area. And it doesn't look like this area or this building would be geared towards student housing, which was more of a concern that we had for the last roof garden this applicant brought before us, or the roof deck.
I think you're correct in that, Mr. Chairman, although students,
Probably
you know.
not going to be attractive to students, but neither here nor there. I don't really have the same concerns as we had for multiple roof decks adjacent to each other. Like another project that this applicant brought before us, but, commissioners, do you have any questions of the applicant, any comments? Before we hear the staff report and then open it up to, public comment? Go ahead, Dave.
Do I understand you'll be heating with gas in this building? Is that what you're projecting, hot water, HVAC, natural gas?
Correct. Yeah, it would likely be a combination of gas, and I know in previous units we have used electric applications as well. But it would likely be a combination of gas and electric.
So this gets back to our discussion earlier tonight. The city is very sensitive to sustainability and the state towards act on climate. So just as a point of reference in your environmental impact here, you don't speak to that, you'll be increasing the city's carbon footprint under that application. Instead of perhaps, is there any incentive to make the building all electric, i.e. burning no carbon in the building?
I mean, it's definitely something that I think we would have to consult with the owner and just see what's efficient enough for the units anyways, and in terms of being able to properly heat and cool the space throughout, especially being 5 stories and having the open structure down below. But I think we're definitely open to that if the engineers as well kind of lean towards that way. I know have been using a little bit more electric components anyways, condensers and such like that, mini splits. So I think we're definitely leaning towards that way, but I can't promise that it will be fully electric. So.
Thank you.
My only other comment along the same lines is that you say you keep one tree and put another one. I didn't know if there was any room in the back next to the neighbors and on the 10-foot setback on the left. Well, on the left, as we see here, the 10-foot setback and in that area at the back. So you could increase the tree coverage if there's not anything underneath.
Yeah, that, our main encumbrance there is our gas and electrical service, will be passing through there. It's something we can take a look at with the landscape architects and just concerned with the root cover, through that utility corridor there.
Well, in the back corner of the top, that where I guess that's the transformer.
Near the transformer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable request.
It's not really germane to this application, but do you have any history on the site as to why all of these utilities travel through your site? I've not seen an instance like, was it all one parcel at one time? Was it subdivided off?
I don't know if they were combined. You know, Mike, it's something I have never seen in many years. It's why we have frontage, so
Right.
everybody has, you know, their own water and sewer and gas. It's very odd that the utility companies allowed it. It's probably a pre-existing condition, and as maybe the lots were split up, it just wasn't corrected. But it's truly very odd to see private utilities pass over private property lines.
Especially when I assume they're available on Seekonk Street directly behind.
Yeah.
Cause all the other.
Fortunate for us, with our program, we're able to accommodate everything moving, especially southerly from Pitman Street, and same with the gas line. So, thankfully on this project, there is remedy, but it is very, it's very unique. It's very odd.
Would you have to provide easements for the gas line to
There
the?
already are easements, right?
If there's not easements, that we have to, revise the meets and bounds description, I'm sure the utility company will ask us, for easements, at least for the gas line.
I'm just looking at the packages in front of us and the figure of 57 feet, but it seems like we have 2 sets of elevations. One shows the head houses for the stairs and elevator and one doesn't. And the 57 feet is without that. So I just want to make sure. Well, what we're really talking about is with the head houses, right? I'm not sure it makes a difference. But
So
I just wanna-
there's a way we classify building height. And
Okay.
Bob can explain that a little bit more.
Yeah.
And also just clarify, like the head houses do exist within this proposal, is that correct?
The stairwells?
Yeah,
To the developer.
Yeah, so the question, that question actually came up during the interdepartmental meeting that we had, where they were asking us to show what the overrun would be. And the applicant church, I believe, is how they refer to in the zoning code, in terms of how they're not associated with the roof height. So we're only showing up until the roof height. And obviously our stair towers and our overrun for our elevator would far exceed that.
Yeah, so we don't count roof structures when it comes to building height.
Architectural features, there's a variety of elements that are not included in the actual calculation.
Yeah, I mean, I can just run chimneys, parapet walls, skylights, steeples, flagpoles, smokestacks, cooling towers, elevator bulkheads, fire towers, monuments, water towers, stacks, stage towers, scenery lofts, tanks, stair towers, so all that stuff.
Any other questions of the applicant? Okay.
I just want to make a point, so, you know, this is an example of a project that, but for this extra story, so first of all, it's a minor land development project. The current state law and the future state law come January 1st. And our regulations as you adopted them, and we'll review them again later in the meeting. This will continue to be a minor land development project. And the law says minor land development projects get reviewed at preliminary plan. You have I believe it's 65 days to consider preliminary plan, so you could theoretically stretch this over more than one meeting, but you know, it's one stage of review, and then final plan gets delegated to staff. After January 1st, if they didn't have this additional story, if this was a 4-story building and met all the requirements, then they would submit to us, we would review it, and if we found that it fully complied, we would approve it. So what we've tried to do with our regulations is make them so that compliance is possible. We're not a town that puts in arbitrary regulations or makes it impossible to comply, such that everybody needs to go in front of a board for discretionary approval. That said, there are lots of ways to design a building that fits within our requirements. And we do have design standards. We talk about building materials. We talk about the amount of fenestration that's required on a facade. We talk about how a ground floor is detailed. But we don't get into those sort of subjective regulations. Well, first of all, our regulations, I think, are objective. When it comes to design review, that can be a little subjective. You know, the proportions, the materiality, sometimes the colors, the details of cornice lines and entries and things like that. We don't really do that here. If this was in downtown or in a historic district, there would be a lot of discussion about those things. Again, we make it explicit in our new development review regulations when somebody is asking for something discretionary like this, you can ask more questions. So I just want to put that out there, you know, going forward, something to consider, you know, as we continue into the new year with our new regulations. That is on the table. I don't consider myself to be a design expert. We do have some design experts in my office who would probably have some interesting things to say about this building. I'm not one of them. You know, there might be some, and I believe there is some design expertise on this board. So, I'm just saying this because, it came up as a topic. If you want this board to get more involved in sort of design review, I think there are some possibilities and there are some times at which that could be appropriate, but in a lot of ways, that's sort of up to you.
I was just remembering the case from a couple months ago, I think, I think we looked at it all year, with the design, of that building on Wickham Streets. And so just kind of considering this area and that area, they're really different, like the neighborhoods are different. And I remember at that presentation, what a lot of people from the public kept saying is it doesn't look like the neighborhood. And I guess that was a subjective thing, but it was also something we could push a little bit on. They would say, I think that there was a standard in the plan that it has to conform to the neighborhood. Is that correct?
So I would disagree with that the comprehensive plan says that all projects have to be, have to comply with or conform to a undefined neighborhood character. The language in the comp plan, when we talk about neighborhood character, speaks to identifying certain aspects of neighborhood character and then trying to tailor regulations in a way that new development, if it complies with those regulations, will fit to a certain degree in terms of size, scale, and massing in a very general way. The comprehensive plan also talks more about neighborhood character when it gets into the special districts like downtown and the historic districts where design review is allowed and mandatory. And in that case, those boards, have a charge of looking at the building and how it operates within the context. That's not to say that you need to put on blinders and say, we're only considering this building and we're only considering, how it conforms to zoning. But I would say you have less authority when it comes to that, especially with buildings that are conforming. Again, with buildings that are asking for something discretionary, I believe, and it's going to be explicit, it is explicit in the regulations you adopted last month, that you do have a lot more authority to weigh in on issues like that. You may want to do that more with a building like Wickenden Street where they're asking for a lot more. In that case, they were asking for additional height, plus they were asking for the dimensional adjustment for the rear yard setback. They were asking for waiver on ground floor uses. Part of their building is overhanging the public right of way. So there's a lot there that they're asking for. And I think in turn, you have a lot more authority to kind of, open up that design. And I think we did that when we said, that mass of that building should not look like 6 stories from the corner of Brook and Wickenden Street. In a case like this, I think this is a simpler building. It's more or less a flat site. You don't have that kind of strange grade condition. This is a very straightforward ask for one additional story.
And again, as presented here, this will still come before us January 1st. If it was a fully compliant project, it wouldn't. If they weren't asking for the design incentives, I should rephrase. They weren't asking dimensional adjustment or the additional height. This would be administratively reviewed and approved based on the development plan.
One more time for our education, could you say what neighborhood conformance? Could you say that again? What it means? What does it mean?
I don't know that I can really tell you what it means. Neighborhood character. Well, I mean, you could say that, the Fox Point, the residential areas of the Fox Point neighborhood are characterized by 3 to 3.5 story wood frame residential buildings, detached, separated from each other by, 10 to 20 feet and with front porches and front doors, and they're typically, 1, 2, 3 and multifamily structures. Wickenden Street, you could say it's characterized by a lot of houses that have had interventions on the ground floor to introduce commercial space, but with a smattering of commercial and institutional buildings that were built over the course of many decades. Pitman Street, you'd characterize it a little bit differently. That said, the C2 zone is kind of a blunt instrument. It doesn't, it says this is what's allowed. It doesn't say this is what's here. But what it means is you're allowed to do something that might not be here. You might have a C2 zone overlaying an area of all single story, commercial buildings, but you can build 4-story, mixed use buildings by right and even go taller with the incentives. So, there are times when both the comprehensive plan and the zoning ordinance allow property owners to build something that is arguably out of character.
Yeah, I guess you can think about it like a vacant lot next to 2 historic buildings. You don't necessarily need to build a faux historic building in between there. A modern building would fit and complement the neighborhood just as much as those historic buildings that were existing do, probably more so than a fake historic building, because those don't ever really turn out to be out of here. Exactly. So
I just, since we were on the topic, it doesn't really have much to do with my perception of this project, so, of this particular project.
Right.
And I know they probably want to go home to
Oh, it's still early. We're making good time so far. You're not stressed, are you? Well, no, okay, all right. Oh, right, we have the 195 bridge to get to.
I do think it's a good point for the earlier discussion and
Yeah.
the follow-up on that is to the extent we can, thinking about taking out big state, like if none of us sitting here know exactly how to answer what that clause in the comprehensive plan means for us, then not having it in the comprehensive plan
But
update.
the comprehensive plan is an aspirational document. It's what you're striving to do over the next 10 years. So it's more like, it's not concrete like the zoning
Yeah.
ordinance is. It's a living, breathing document that's,
Right.
that
It's more
interpretation is
qualitative,
a
yeah.
part of that in implementing the goals over the next 10 years of land development. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, although when it comes to land use, it's a little bit more concrete and it's a little bit more directive in terms of what your zoning has to be. Your zoning has to be consistent with the land use section and the future land use map for sure. That's legal. A lot of the other language about, character and other aspirational, concepts, they're not as binding. And that's sometimes we see that disconnect when people cite sections of the comprehensive plan and they say, well, this development is going to violate that section of the comprehensive plan. But that's not what that section is supposed to mean. What it's supposed to mean is when we say we want to, in some places, reinforce and preserve neighborhood character, you do that through regulations that require certain things to happen. And the most extreme of those regulations is historic district zoning, where the historic district and the chairman can attest to this, the historic district commission is gonna tell you what your building is gonna look like.
and they are a design review body. They are specifically a design review body, and they will make comments on the design and the elements used in constructing even the materials. I can attest to that, yes. We are not that body.
I know we're getting very philosophical, and I know Mr. Garrity has another meeting he's supposed to be at, but These are.
I'm good with time, even though, thank you. I'm very good with time. Appreciate it.
Especially with our newer members, I think it's important to get some of this context.
Any other questions of the applicant before we hear the staff report? And we do still have to take public comment. Okay, Joanne, take it away.
All right, thanks, Mr. Chair. And as you saw from the applicant's presentation, this is a largely conforming development. They did speak about how the building conforms to the dimensional regulations of the C2 zone, and we also note in our report, they will be providing ample transparency as we desire for developments like this. They will be meeting the landscaping, the parking, they will be providing the required amount. And we don't foresee a negative environmental impact. However, there are a couple of state approvals that they will need to get. So we do find that this is in conformance with the future land use map of the comprehensive plan, given the land use as well as conformance with objective H2. It complies with the zoning ordinance save for the height and for which they've requested dimensional adjustment. We don't foresee negative environmental impact. This will be a buildable lot upon merging, and adequate vehicular and pedestrian access will be provided from Pitman Street. So based on that, we recommend that you grant the dimensional adjustment for height, finding that the applicant is eligible as they will be providing internal parking. And as far as the master plan, as far as the preliminary plan goes, we recommend that you approve that plan subject to these conditions. That they merge the lots prior to final plan approval, that the landscaping plan be subject to the city forester's approval. The drainage calculation shall be subject to the city engineer's approval. The applicant shall submit approvals from the state approvals from NBC and RIDEM at the final plan stage. And also they do need above and below ground encroachment permits that they can submit at the permitting stage. Then we ask that the validity of the preliminary plan be extended to 1 year from the recording of the approval letter. And finally, we ask that final plan approval be delegated to DPD staff.
Okay, thank you, Joanne. Again, this is a public hearing, so if you care to comment on this agenda item and you're here in this room, please raise your hand or come forward. And if you're joining us online, please raise your virtual hand or press *9 if you're calling in.
Okay, we do have a couple of folks online. I don't see anybody in the room. Okay, I'm gonna allow Matthew Shaling to talk.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Why don't you introduce yourself and then go ahead with your comment.
Perfect. My name is Matthew Schelling. I live here just a half mile away from this location at 372 Lloyd. And so I regularly shop at Eastside Market and like that. And I think this is a perfect location. And I'd encourage I support the dimensional adjustment. As a Wayland restaurant resident, I regularly walk, bike, and drive in the area. And I think this is great. When I do bike through the area, when I bike to Eastside Market, I frequently see that there the bike parking is full. And so I did see that, just being out of such a beautiful location right there on the river, on the bike path, and whatnot, that while you are providing a lot of car parking, that there's not that much bike parking. There's only the 4 slots for 16 units. And so in as much as bike parking is much cheaper than a lot of the other amenities that you're providing, I would encourage adding more bike parking for the wonderful residents there in your building. And I'm excited to see this building go up. So thanks for bringing it to our city.
Thank you very much.
There is a bike parking.
Okay, next we have Lily Bogosian.
Thank you very much and good evening. I have a brief comment about the building. I, as you know, tend to be more inclined toward less density, but in this particular case, I do think that the site is appropriate for a building of this size. As to the height of it, as you say, it's by right, and so I can't really argue with it. It is taller than the other buildings, and I think given that there are buildings in the area that are quite a bit lower in height. I do think you're setting a new precedent, and I know that's that's the intention, to provide more housing, and we do want to see more housing provided. So in that sense, I don't really have an issue with it. The only thing I wanted to say is with regard, I can't help myself, is with regard to neighborhood character. I have to say that there are things that are appropriate in terms of talking about how this building compares to Wickenden. And I think one of the issues that is cited in the comprehensive plan is preserving view corridors, and that's a very specific thing that does apply in the case of Wickenden Street, and putting emphasis on things like that. So, appropriate residential densities that accommodate growth is a good thing. And I think the issue is without negatively impacting surrounding neighborhood character. And so I would just hope that with regard to this new building, that you would have some impact in terms of how this building is built. There are issues when you are affecting an environmental area of that significance, and the only way to address the tree canopy is by adding a street tree. It's a stretch to call it anything environmental, and it's, when you have that kind of increase in the carbon footprint that is, with parking that requires 24/7 lighting, and you're not going electric, I would just urge or request the commission to consider requesting more green on that site. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public? Bob?
No, there are none.
Okay. Seeing no one else from the public who wishes to comment on this matter, we will close the public comment portion of this agenda item. I'll go back to the applicant. I think there are two main points brought up. One was look into more bike parking, and the second was look into more green space. We've already talked about that second one. Is the applicant willing to investigate some of those requests from both the commission and the general public?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. No objection. We put as much landscaping on the property as we possibly can. We engage a landscape architect to do that and encourage him to put as much greenery on the space as possible.
How many park?
As well as look at alternate locations architecturally for parking.
How many bike parking spaces are there? Are there four, like?
We have
Mr.
4,
Shanley?
which is required.
Yeah, that's the minimum. Okay.
There may be opportunity in that basement program to extend that to 8, or maybe even 12.
Yeah, we'd hope that you implore us and look at that. And the green space, obviously. Ms. Bogosian doesn't often come out in favor of high density development in her area, so I would take that to heart. Maybe do a little goodwill there. Anything else? Okay. I think, first of all, before we continue on to the discussion, that we'll need 2 votes on this. We'll need one for the dimensional adjustment and one for the master plan.
Is it master plan or preliminary?
I'm sorry, preliminary plan. That's mistyped in a few places. It's also in the first sentence there as well. So we'll replace master with preliminary plan then. I've already stated my opinion about this project. I think it's a pretty good project for this area.
I'll make a motion that we grant the requested dimensional adjustment for the height and the additional story.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, we'll go around and do a voice vote. Noel?
Aye.
Will? Aye. Charlotte?
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Now it would be a preliminary plan.
So I'll make a motion that we should approve the preliminary plan And do I have to read all the conditions listed or subject to the conditions listed?
In the staff
In the
report.
staff report.
That's a valid motion. All right. We have a motion. Do we have a second? All right, go around and do another voice vote. Noel?
Aye.
Will?
Aye.
Charlotte?
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Best of luck.
Thank you.
Attorney
Thank you
Gary,
very
can-
much, Mr. Chairman.
You can be
Thank
off
you
to
for the
whatever else.
courtesy.
All right, so we've been at it for a little over 2 hours now, or about 2 hours now. I'd like to, take a 5-minute break and then we'll reconvene. Just need to use the restroom real quick. So we will come back at 6:45. All right, it's 6:46. We're calling this City Plan Commission meeting back to order. We're going back to the beginning. This is on the written agenda circulated. It's agenda item number 2. We will hear now 2 and 3 and then jump back to 8, which was originally 8. So this is agenda item number 2. It's a city council referral number 3562 for 748 Atwells Avenue.
And thanks, Mr. Chair. This is a request for rezoning from R3 to R4. The subject property is a 3-family dwelling and the applicant is requesting the rezoning to R4 in order to have an extra unit in the basement. So I guess the applicant's here, they can tell us more about the property and why it's being requested.
Thank you, Chair and members of the commission. My name is Louis Olmo and I am the owner of 748 Atwells Avenue. I am here today to request rezoning from an R3 to R4 as a 3-family dwelling unit sits on the lot with potential for a basement unit. Currently, the basement has 2 entrances, very spacious with high ceilings. The location is within walking distance of good transportation, restaurants, banks, grocery stores, local bakeries, etc. I believe the current configuration of the house is not being fully utilized to its true potential, thereby meaning it can easily support more units. There's no secret, the city of Providence has an ongoing housing crisis and there is a demand for units. So I believe with this zone change, this can be the first step in combating this issue. In addition, prior to this hearing, I have hired an architect to have a vision of the basement unit and how that will look once finalized and can provide those sketches to you upon request. Lastly, I will work with the city to pull any and all necessary permits to conform with R4 zoning requirements and also any recommendations that the DPD recommends as far as fencing off the parking area and meeting the canopy coverage requirement.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions of the applicant?
Is there gonna be egress for that basement unit? Is there gonna be doorways going outside of the building? Or is-
Yes, there's currently one right now.
Yeah, there is, okay.
Yep.
I guess let's hear the staff report.
Sure, thanks, Mr. Chair. And as the applicant told you, this is an area that is zoned R3, but is in proximity to commercial and other multifamily development. And the future land use map of the plan does say that this area, which is intended for medium density residential development, is also suitable for R4 and multifamily housing. So based on that, we do find that this change would conform to the comprehensive plan. However, we do also take these zone changes as an opportunity to maybe improve the property or use it as a way to introduce some changes. So when we visited, we did see that there were some vehicles parked on the grass. The rear yard was kind of unevenly paved, and we feel that it would be more orderly if that parking area was delineated from the main house. And so that's something that the applicant could achieve by fencing it off and having a more orderly manner of parking. And also, given that there is some green space in the yard, we do feel that the applicant should meet the canopy coverage requirement in order to enhance the residential character of the house. Based on those changes, we don't foresee negative impact and that it would conform to section 101 of the zoning ordinance. So based on that, we recommend that you make a positive recommendation to the city council. Based on these conditions, that the applicant fence off the parking area and separate it from the dwelling prior to the public hearing for this item before the city council. And finally, the applicant shall meet the canopy coverage requirement under the supervision of the city forest.
Okay, thank you very much. This is a public hearing, so if there's anyone from the public who wishes to be heard on this matter, please come forward, raise your hand, or if you're joining us virtually, raise your virtual hand or press *9 if you're calling in. And seeing none, we will close the public comment portion of this agenda item. I think this one's pretty straightforward. Yep. This is on the uphill side of, Atwells past, Onlyville Square.
Excuse me, is there any parking there?
Yes, right off of, Atwells,
Oh, that way
right next to
around?
the side, right around the corner. So there's a total of about 8 parking spaces currently right now. Right on, Cutler Street.
There used to be a garage.
Oh, yes,
right?
yes, I forgot to mention
That
that,
was
yes.
demolished and now there's still the concrete path at
That's what I'm seeing.
2 different levels.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I'm seeing, but
Right.
on the map.
It looked to me like it was about 4 spaces. You're saying you could get 8 cars in
Yeah.
in that area that's paved?
Oh, yeah, yeah, for sure.
Really?
Especially when it snows, people do, can fit in that. Yeah.
Well, you're not allowed to park across the sidewalk.
Yeah, no, so do you mean like, next to the house or?
Well, so on the side street, on those, there's sort of 2 levels that used to be that garage. I thought that was like a 4-bay garage that would have space for 4 cars.
Yeah, no, I've seen about 6 to 8.
Okay. At any rate, they can meet the minimum parking requirement on that.
For you.
Up for 4 units, yes.
Pretty clear cut on this one.
Basement apartments are a thing.
They are.
And if we can get them legal, it'd be better.
Well, I was gonna say, by next summer, maybe it'll be an ADU or a granny flat, if the General Assembly gets their wish.
But I think, my thought is, it's a good move for us to do because there's so many, illegal basement apartments in the city.
Yeah.
And if there was a way to make them conform.
So way to make
the
it conform,
regulations
he's gonna have
and
to
all
pull building permits, he's gonna have to get
Get them
inspections,
inspected.
exactly. It'll be a unit of record. Which I'm in favor of.
More taxes.
Yeah. All right, I think at this time we'd entertain a motion.
Motion to approve?
Based on the staff report and the recommendations in the,
Exactly, yes.
okay. All right, we have a motion, do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, we'll go around with a voice vote. Noel?
Aye.
Will?
Aye.
Charlotte?
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Best of luck.
Thank you.
Moving right along to agenda item number 3. Referral number, it's another city council referral. It's referral number 3563. There are quite a few addresses here, so it's agenda item number 3.
Sure, thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, and commissioners, this is a request for a rezoning from R3 to R4 for 5 sites and MMU 75 to R4 for 2 lots. And as you'll see, these are scattered mostly around the Federal Hill area. So the applicant is requesting these changes with the intent of developing multifamily dwellings on the lots, and in some cases, legalizing what's currently on there. And so, as you know, when we rezone to R4, we do ask that the applicant provide us some plans just so that we can get an idea of what they would like to see on there. And you will see the applicant did distribute some handouts that will tell you more about that. And I will turn over to the applicant. They can tell you about the change.
Good evening, everyone, chairman, members of the board. The applicant is present today in the room. If you have any specific questions towards him, I'll be speaking on behalf of him tonight. All right, again, my name is Julissa Arce. Nice to meet you all. This is the first time of me being before this board as a licensed attorney under my own license. And so this is a special moment, so it's an honor to be before you tonight.
Congratulations.
Thank you, thank you. And special thanks to Bob, Troyan, Alexis, if she's listening eventually, for being so patient over this time as me catching up to speed, to get to this point. So thank you. And as a quick side note, before I begin, I just want to mention that this zone change petition is one of my favorites to be the first one that I'm presenting on, because it happens to be down the street from the nonprofit organization that I recently became a board member of. So it's down the street from the Federal Hill House. So this is definitely close to home, and I'm excited to see how this moves forward tonight and with the city council. All right, so with all of that, let's go ahead and begin. So an important note is that this is an exciting zone change petition. We have full council support, especially the council president. This is her ward. Everyone wants to see these vacant lots in Federal Hill be used for housing. And so with that, the overview that Choyan provided is accurate. The packet that I distributed to you a moment ago has no new information. Everything in there you have full knowledge of. It provides a memorandum summarizing all of the findings in the staff report and the information that I'll be reiterating to you tonight. It also comes along with excerpts of the comprehensive plan in which this zone change petition is consistent with. Following that, you'll see a PowerPoint presentation that was presented to Bob, Troyan, and Alexis in the previous meeting, just summarizing some photos and of the addresses for the different lots of this petition. Considering the fact that there are different bundles, it'll be an easy reference for you to follow along as I discuss the nature of the neighborhood and whatnot. All right, so for the first bundle is we have a zone change petition for the R3 to R4, and that is for 242 Federal Street, 93 Knight Street, 141 Penn Street, and 135 Ridge Street. And so these are all vacant lots, right? You'll see within the vicinity. So right there, you can see that this section would be going from left to right, it'll be the third and so on. So those are the ones we're looking for from the R3 to R4. So yes, they're all within the immediate vicinity of 2 to 3 to multifamily dwellings. So that shows that this is consistent with an R4 use. Additionally, an R4 use would provide great opportunity for all these lots. The proposed plans for these vacant lots is substantially similar to what we have presented before the board for 693 Douglas Ave, which is also from owned by the applicant. So that referral number is present in that package that I gave you. Again, something you guys have all seen that you guys have recommended, that's also received full support from the city council. And there you'll see the site plans there. So again, what we will be providing there is these 8 units having this missing middle housing structure, right? And so the goal is to have this repeated site plan for all of these vacant lots so that we can have a direct response to the housing crisis. By doing so, we are streamlining the way that we are going about construction. Whenever a project goes beyond 2 units, it becomes complex, extremely costly, and the best way to justify that cost of building, the developer needs to have be really good at building the same thing, right? And so that's why we'll be using the site plan for Douglas Ave as a reference here. So I just wanted to highlight that as the staff report wanted to see, requested, to see the proposed plans for the site. It will be substantially similar. Of course, it won't be an exact replica, but it will be using the same technique and materials, moving forward for that. All right. So for the last lot in the R3 to R4 petition, is 99 the Pascal Ave, which is the very far right, as you see on the screen, right there. So the reason why this one is separate from the other R3s is because this one's not a vacant lot. There's currently a 2-story dwelling, occupying the property. So it's kind of a riddle in R3. There's not much we can really do with the property with it being in an R3 zone currently, in terms of viability, and construction costs. However, an R4 provides opportunity. So this is also consistent with the characteristic of the neighborhood. It's surrounded by other multifamilies. And as you can see in the PowerPoint as well, you can see what that would look like. Now, for the proposed plan for this lot specifically, because it is not vacant and there is currently a dwelling on it, as of right now, we have been in close communications with planning to see what would be the best fit for this lot. Most likely, it will be an additional story to make it a 4-unit building. But again, we'll be in close communications with planning moving forward with the zone change petition for this specific lot. All right, so moving on to the last bundle, which is the MU to R4, which on the screen are from left to right, those first 3 right there. So those are the Ridge Street. So 155 and 157, they directly abut each other. Pardon me, I misspoke. Just to clarify, it's the first 2. Those are the first 2 in MU. The third property was already addressed in the R3. So I just want to get that clear. So that was for misspeaking. All right, so back to the MU. As you can see, it directly abuts an R4 zone. There's currently an existing multifamily on one of the lots. So that goes to show that it already will be consistent with an R4 use. And these 2 specifically are a fun petition. I like to highlight that, as you know, in the area, and as you can, it's more easily shown and clearly shown in the PowerPoint slides that I provided to you, that on the Google Maps screen, you'll see that this used to be a highway on-ramp, and it is now becoming a pedestrian walkway from Federal Hill to the valley, which is currently separated due to the train tracks. So what this means is that the neighborhood is shifting towards a more residential and less dense use. So an R4 would be more consistent with the character of the neighborhood compared to a mixed use, especially because the whole legislative purpose of an R4 is primarily for residential use, and the proposed plans for these lots will be to provide the 8 units and multifamily dwellings. And so with all of that, I just want to say thank you for hearing me on this petition. And so we ask that you approve you approve the staff report based on the proposed plans referenced to the 693 Douglas Ave with no other conditions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, do you have questions of the applicant? Petitioner? Please, Bob. I'm a little confused, so maybe you can.
Yeah, so
This is a noisy application.
yeah, couple things I wanna just talk about. This is unconventional in the sense that typically when someone files a petition for multiple lots, they're contiguous and they comprise one site. This is in effect 6 petitions combined into one. I'd say that the two in the MMU along Ridge Street sort of would comprise one. Again, unconventional. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world to consider them together. Otherwise, we're gonna have to go through this 6 or 7 times. They will have to get noticed in such a way that there's a map for each one of these that gets published in the Providence Journal, and for every one of these parcels, everybody within 200 owning property within 200 feet of these parcels is gonna get noticed. So it's unconventional, but it's not an illegal petition. They happen to all be in the 13th ward, and they happen to all be owned or at least under control by the same entity.
That is correct.
I wanted to point that out. I also want to point out that this map is not right. There's a problem here. That's not 93 Knight Street. 93 Knight Street is actually up here. I think there are 2 vacant lots here, and there are also 2 vacant lots here. It's actually this one right here. So I just want to confirm, maybe with Julissa or with the property owner, Mr. Vicioso, that in fact, 93 Knight Street is it's this lot here. It's at the corner of Knight and Tell Street.
That is correct.
Can you confirm that? Okay.
Is it still lot AP 33 lot 51?
Yes. It is.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So I think there's at least one other mistake here. 240. Well, I just want to confirm this. It's important that we get this right. 242 Federal.
242 Federal Street is 843.
Yeah, that one's right. The Ridge Street ones and Penn Street ones. Penn Street one is right. Let me just confirm. 99 Deep Pasquale. $787. Yeah, and that one, that is identified. So that's called ARV Properties LLC. Is that you, Louis? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that one's correctly. So there's just one error in identifying a property on the map, but otherwise the documentation is the same.
So the petition is correct, just the map.
The map is, yeah, and when it gets published in the journal and so forth, that's gotta be right. I think the other thing these have in common is all but one of them are proposed for development on vacant lots of these 8-unit buildings. 8-unit buildings would be what we call development plan review. It's a staff level review. These would not be land development projects, staff or board or commission review. So they're a little bit smaller of a project, but still, they would necessitate the R4 zoning. And then with respect to the 99 De Pasquale Avenue, any addition, it already has 3 units, so if they were to add on to it, the R4 would allow for that to happen. And we would work with them to ensure that these conform with zoning. It would be our expectation that should you recommend approval and should the city council approve these zoning changes, that we would not support any zoning variances. They would need to comply with the lot coverage requirements, the impervious surface ratios, the setbacks, the height, everything that applies to the R4 zone. And then the last thing I'll say is that there are some departures so there are many departures in this neighborhood from the R3 zoning. There's all kinds of, there's all kinds of commercial in the neighborhood. There's also many multifamilies. So this certainly would not be a departure from land use in the area. And there have also been a handful of discrete R4 changes that you've already made. You can see one of them here on the map, and there's another one over here, I believe. These colors are a little off, but there are a couple of those. So, you know, it's already happening. And, you know, honestly, as we start to think of think forward to the comprehensive plan, we might be looking for areas that would be suitable for larger scale rezoning for R4, or, you know, otherwise. You know, I know, I've already heard from a council member who believes that all the single family zoning in his neighborhood should be upzoned to at least R2. So, you know, I would love to kind of get away from these discrete rezonings. You know, something like that extra unit that we saw earlier, I'd like to see maybe a mechanism where that's allowed by right, or a special use permit or something. This is to go to, you know, 8 units, it probably is a rezoning, but, you know, perhaps it's a neighborhood thing rather than a you know, discrete petition. That said, I think our staff report speaks for itself.
Have we heard from Councilwoman Miller about this? Have you had any conversations with her, or has the department heard?
Members of the firm, and I believe, well, I know members of the firm, Dylan Conley has spoken with council, and he's relayed the message that we have full council support. Yep. Also, I would like to also note that all proposed plans are to be subpar any thresholds for minor land development, so that we would not have to go before planning and just go straight to building. So I just want to put that on the record to know that any of all these plans again are 8 units, and below any thresholds for minor land development.
Meaning they'd comply with all zoning, because if you need zoning relief, you'd have to come before us.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, let's hear the commissioners. Do you have questions for the applicant?
I just have a quick question. So I'm looking at the pair of structures on, I guess it's the Douglas Ave sites, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
And we're to understand that the proposed structures are going to be 3 stories with units on the first, second, and third story, but this base, are there units in the basement? Or is this just storage?
The basement is just storage.
Okay.
So are you confirming that these would be 3-story buildings?
Yes.
And I guess my other question is that these drawings, the structures are paired because that's how they would be on Douglas Ave, but they might not be on the other sites depending on site configuration.
To the most extent possible, it would be reflecting this site plan. So the goal is to have the middle missing housing structure. And of course, it'll be to the extent practical and possible. And if there is any change in the site plans that do not conform to any of the code or regulations, we will make sure to come before the planning board again.
I think to Charlotte's question, there are, I can't remember if these are 4 buildings
I could probably help
yeah.
clarify.
Do you want to come up and maybe speak into the microphone?
Introduce yourself and then speak. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Luis Vicioso. I'm the owner of this project. to clarify the pictures that we see on Douglas Avenue. What we see here is a 60 unit. Each of those buildings has an 8 unit. So I think that where's the confusion. But going back, if you take a look at one of those units, that's what we're trying to build, just one of those buildings and not two like we see in the picture on Douglas. On Douglas happened to be 2 buildings because there were 2 different lots.
I see the lot configuration now on the cover page. You
Yeah.
can see the lot lines. Any other questions of the applicant? At this time, we can always reserve the right to call them back. All right, with that, let's hear the staff report and then see if there's any public comment.
All right, and Commissioners, so this is a change from R3 to R4 as has been discussed, and as you saw, it is on scattered sites. So as you spoke about today, you will see that the future land use map as well as the zoning ordinance reflect what you see on the ground, which is you see a diversity of housing types, 2 to 3 family dwellings, as well as commercial and multifamily. So based on that, we feel that rezoning these sites would be appropriate. And as for the Ridge Street sites, we do feel that they are zone MMU 75 and R4 would be appropriate to accommodate multifamily development. So based on the land use map as well as the purposes of zoning, we feel that this is a change that would conform to what we would like to see. And as the applicant has provided sample plans for what you would expect to see on the site. And it would be the type of development that we see in the R4 zone. So based on that, if you're fine with what was presented, we would recommend that you make a positive recommendation to the city council.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone here in the audience or online who cares to comment on this submission? Looking around and I see no one here.
Nobody online.
And nobody online. All right, with that, we'll close the public comment portion of this agenda item. Well, for your first application, this is quite the application. And we'll blame Dylan for the highlighting of the lots, so that won't be on you.
It wasn't Dylan. It wasn't either of our faults, but it's okay.
Someone's fault. I like blaming Dylan. Okay.
So if we approve this,
If we make a positive recommendation to the city council
that's what I meant. And they approve it,
and they approve it,
then could it be that other designs could come into this after?
Yeah.
A bigger, more dense,
well,
there's no way to limit it to
Well,
this.
there's no way to limit, there's no way to limit it well, I mean, you could, but the fact is that they are going to be limited by all the dimensional regulations of the R4 zone. And we did, design that zone in a way that, the way the building sits on the lot, the amount of lot coverage, the amount of pervious versus impervious surface is all the same, as the R3 zone. So
The setbacks.
yes,
apply.
it's the same. And in fact, the building height is the same
So it can't
as
be,
well.
Sorry, like the commercial unit where you can go to the street.
That's right,
And that's-
unless everything on the street is already at 0 setback. In that case, you're required to average, but you can go between 0 and 5 feet
But
of
you
that
can't go
average.
to the law lines.
Not to the side lot lines or the rear lot lines.
which is why we prefer the R4 zone as opposed to like a C zone with a footnote. That's why we've been
Does
pushing
parking
this.
Qualify in this, is the parking, is that allowed to push to the lot line?
So parking, so first of all, on lots of under 10,000 square feet in the R4 zone, parking is not required. But if they do provide parking, parking it can be in the side yard or the rear yard. But if it's in the side yard and like a driveway, you can park the car out to the property line, just like you can in any other property. You could also build, integral or attached garages. So you could, drive in.
Well, it looks like some of these are underneath.
You could have that. Yes, you could have that.
Parking doesn't count for setbacks, is that what you're saying?
So the parking, yeah, you're not required to set your parking back. Parking areas can be on lot lines. But we restrict the amount of paving that you're allowed to do. So you could have.
Coverage still applies, the.
Lot coverage still applies. Yep.
Any changes in the water management in this from one to the other? No.
No. Nope.
So effectively, the difference between R3 and R4 is just the density of.
It's the number of units that you're allowed. And now, the one substantive difference is that, I believe in R4, we don't cap you at a maximum number of stories. So you could theoretically build, within that same 45-foot height limit, you could build 4 stories if
you can make it work.
If you can make it work.
Got it. I think given the neighborhood, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
There's a lot of this already.
yeah, we've done a piecemeal from Atwells to Broadway already, actually almost to Westminster. There have been some infill R4s that we've approved throughout, since R4 has been approved to use, all the way up through this corridor. And it
Yeah.
seems appropriate for the area.
I guess the only thing I would add is more of just a side note to the applicant is if there are ways to introduce site-specific elements within the various plans, I think
I would agree with that.
that is nice. Just to respond to the, I understand the comment of it's more efficient to come up with one building design and scatter it around, and that's been done in many places. But obviously, if there are moments of site specificity, that also helps.
I would agree with that.
So why would we keep the R3 zone then? Like, if we're, but I mean, just thinking about
I think
like
that's
the
what-
neighborhood thing that we were talking about earlier, and we wanna make.
That's kind of what Bob said, is maybe there would be areas where you'd be able to do a
or
large
just
swath.
change R3 to higher density or something.
Well, I think it's an interesting question. I'm not sure I'd be ready to give up on R3 because I do think that there are, a lot of neighborhoods where, 3-family is the predominant, housing type. That said, I think we mentioned this to you before, that R2 doesn't make frankly a whole lot of sense.
It doesn't really.
Because there's an awful lot of non-conforming 3 families in the R2 zone. But this is a comp plan question.
Yeah, and would there be an opportunity to maybe have a meeting with the city plan commission and the city council and talk about neighborhoods that might be able to do an overall zone change?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly a possibility. I think we're talking about some interesting questions here. One of them being, if you are allowed to build the same mass of a building, should it matter how many units are in that building? This came up with a zoning change right around the corner from these in Federal Hills on Knight Street. Someone wanted to take a triple decker that had 9 bedrooms in it and three units, 3 bedrooms each, so 9 bedrooms. And they wanted to turn it into 9,
Like micro.
9 individual, that was the Eric Army project.
I remember that.
And at the time, we weren't in favor of it because the comprehensive plan didn't support that kind of thing. But it was an interesting point about, should we care if it's 9 bedrooms or if it's a 3-story structure that meets all the standards? should we care about how many units it is, or for that matter, how many bedrooms it is, or how many people are living there?
Or how many stories it is if it meets the height.
Or how many stories it is. Then again, you know, when it comes to something like student housing, maybe we do have a concern about how many people are living there, but otherwise, you know, the C zones certainly were very much intended to be agnostic about the number of units you can put in a given mass. In 2014, we eliminated all requirements for a certain amount of lot area for every dwelling unit. We didn't do that in the residential zones, but now we have with R4. R4 is agnostic. You know, it's kind of a form, what we call a form-based type zone where we care about the mass of the building and where it sits on the lot, but we really don't care how you configure the units inside. And I think that's a response to the market, where, you know, there seems to be a lot of demand for one-bedroom units or studio units or smaller units, and not a huge demand for larger units.
Yeah, if we change the zoning and the whole neighborhood got our workload in the by third. We wouldn't have to, I mean, so we've done a lot of that. As I was reading the material for this meeting, it's like we've done a lot of city council referral for zoning, and
We have.
then it's usually about the same thing.
A lot of it is. Yeah.
Not always, but of course, but
I mean, R3s to R4 or MMU 75 to R4, especially in this neighborhood where there's density already. I mean, most of it is triple deckers throughout this area or commercial, or, I mean, this is seems to be a natural place for more density.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense in this neighborhood. I do, just thinking about the R2 question, I think, you know, there's some balance that probably needs to be considered around like neighborhood services if potentially zoning, you know, is rewritten to have a bunch more people in places, but I don't know exactly what that balance is. That's not my expertise.
Is R2 viable now? I mean, that's a good question.
Well,
there's R1.
We'll definitely be bringing this back up.
Yeah, this is gonna be a continuing discussion over the next 12 months, 10 months.
I'm just question on the recommendation about the compliant plans to be submitted. So what is that?
Yeah, so I think that they have shown us a scheme that is, that satisfies that condition. You know, they're not showing that they're fully compliant plans for every lot, but they're showing us their intention to build 8-unit buildings on these parcels.
So that would change your staff recommendation to end at city council.
Correct.
Okay. Well, I think it's time for a motion, one way or another.
All right, I'll make the motion to approve, for the report. It's my first motion, by the way.
Yeah.
You read it down there.
His first meeting.
I want this one.
I am on
It's a
it.
winner. You're good.
All right, so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, thank you. We'll go around and do a voice vote. We'll go out of order this time. We'll go Dave,
All right.
Charlotte,
Aye.
Will,
Aye.
Noel,
Aye.
and I vote aye.
Thank
Best of luck.
you. Thank you so much.
All right, and now we are going back to the actual numbering of the agenda as circulated. And we are the 8th item, and it's number 8 on your agenda. This is the Development Review Regulations Public Hearing, changes to the Land Development and Subdivision Review Regulations. You recall that we reviewed this and we approved it last month. There were changes that were added to this document, which I hope you all have had a chance to review because it's our governing document going forward on January 1st. And I think the planning department, zoning department, legal staff did an excellent job articulating our intent throughout this document. So I want to thank them.
Well, thank you, and especially, Mr. Chair, you pointed something out at the last minute that was very important that we've incorporated into this latest draft. I just want to apologize.
I think you were just checking to see if we actually read it.
Yeah. Yeah, we put that in there intentionally. Sorry about the size of the way this printed out, all because of some formatting stuff towards the end, but I've got it up on the screen, so it's a little easier to read. You'll see that we fixed the renumbering in Article 2, as was pointed out. And then I'm just gonna move very quickly to all the things that are different from what you saw last time. The next change is on page 19. And this is what the chairman very helpfully pointed out. So just maybe to back up a second, these are the regulations that govern how subdivisions, land development projects, and what we call development plan review take place. You're familiar with what subdivisions are, you're familiar with what land development projects are. Development plan review is something that you do when it comes to colleges and hospitals. And you also have a role when it comes to certain types of waivers of design standards. We call that development plan review as well. There's other kinds of development plan review that happen in the city. It's done by the Downtown Design Review Committee that governs design in downtown. And there's also something called administrative design development plan review, which is done by staff. So it's a little bit complicated, but we're following the procedures laid out in state law. The one thing that the chair pointed out here, that when we get into this section, decisions on development plan review, we talk about how administrative development plan review is done. And then for formal development plan review, the way that it was written suggested that only the technical review committee, AKA the Downtown Design Review Committee, conducts formal development plan review. We know that's not the case because I just mentioned that the CPC does formal development plan review. So we've just put in here the more generalized term of the permitting authority, which covers both bodies. So I've done that throughout just to make it clear that it's whatever permitting authority happens to be doing this review has to operate within this certain number of days. So that's basically it. And then later, again, major changes. I'm going to talk a little bit about this in a minute, major versus minor changes, but again, clarifying that if there is a major change, it comes back to whatever permitting authority conducted the development plan review. So that's the change in Article 19. We'll move on to page 25. That was just a numbering issue. We had some misnumbered paragraphs, so we've corrected those. And then the next section takes us to page 31. And that's where we are now. We're now in Article 10, which is very important. These are all the procedures that have to be followed. And the one thing that we talked a little bit about was public hearing. There are two times when a public hearing is required under state law. One is for unified development review, which is when you act as a zoning board. The other one is when, if it's a major land development project or a major subdivision, there's a public hearing required at the master plan stage. That's different incidentally, than the way it is today, but that's the way it will be on January first in accordance with state law. Now, these public hearings need to be noticed in the newspaper, and they need to be noticed with mailings sent to property owners within 200 feet property owners in the vicinity of the development project. The rule for unified development review for zoning boards is that it has to be at least 200 feet. So we've stuck with that. The rule for the master for the public hearing for land development projects, it turns out is that it has to be at least 2 abutters, but it could be more. And historically, we have gone beyond noticing direct abutters. We've also noticed abutters within 200 feet. We don't have to do that. So we raised that question last time. And what I said was, well, we've always done it this way. I'm not sure we want to shrink the notice area. The lawyers raised an important question, which they think the law sort of encompasses, but they wanted to make it explicit that notifying more people than is required should not confer what's called aggrieved party status on those people that are given additional notice. So in other words, the law says direct abutters get notice. They could be considered aggrieved parties by virtue of the requirement that they get notice, but the remaining number of abutters who are within 200 feet are not automatically considered aggrieved parties under the state law. So we added language here as advised by Sharon and Megan. Nothing herein shall be considered or construed to change or expand the definition of aggrieved party. Okay, so that's that change. And then finally, I want to okay, that takes us to section 1008, which is changes to approved plans. This is so if there's an approved plan that you or the technical review committee approve, the law says that there are 2 types of changes once something is approved: a minor change and a major change. And we can define locally what constitutes a minor change and what constitutes a major change. And this was unresolved last time, so we've now, I think, resolved it pretty well. But I want to just go through what constitutes a minor change. First and foremost, the plan complies with the zoning ordinance. So no change that would result in a non-compliance could ever be approved at the staff level. It would always have to come back to you. Furthermore, we included here no change that exceeds 20% to any of the following: building height, the length of the building frontage, the gross floor area, the number of dwelling units, and the number of parking spaces. Anything that is anything that is 20% or less could be approved at the staff level. Anything more than that comes back to the permitting authority. We've also added in there, this is language that by the way, this strikeout and this strikeout were simply in order for us to put it into this and add to it. So then you can see we kept 4, 5, and 6 the same. And again, this number 7 was sort of incorporated up here. So it was more kind of reorganizing, but making clear that it's this 20% that triggers a change. Okay, so that is,
and for the newer members, this was a change that was needed. The current development review regulations are, is it 1 unit and 1 parking space?
Yeah, you add 1 unit, you reduce 1 parking space, all of a sudden it's got to come
And then it
back.
has to come back to us.
Yeah,
Which seems overly onerous to applicants. I mean, that's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
If it meets the intent of the approval,
And,
Now-
and it still
and
complies
still
with
complies
zoning.
with zoning, Bob is able to review this and approve this at the staff level. At any time, if he's unsure, he can kick it back to us.
Yeah, it says that.
It's in there too.
It shall not prevent the administrative officer from requesting a recommendation from the permitting authority. Okay, so that's the last change in the text. And then, since last time, we simply, cleaned up, and tightened up all the checklists that appear at the end, all the checklists for, again, subdivision, land development, and develop the different kinds of development plan review. So that's it. I would ask that you, this is still a public hearing. You continued it to this time, so you're obligated to take further comment on this. And then, I would ask that you just, accept these changes. Hopefully we caught everything. If not, we may be back, with some tweaks. I think, like everything, whenever we adopt something of this size, we need to live with it for a little while and see how it works. Test it with real world cases and figure out if we need to, fix it.
I think that's exactly what I said when I brought up this change. The only significant change that I see that needs to be made is the one I pointed out, until we live with this for a while, because we know there's gonna be other stuff that comes up as we review applications, as they get applications in. The real world application of this document will ferret out some unintended consequences. Anything for Bob before we open it up to public comment? Hope you've all had a chance to review and take a look at it. I think the summary of the changes is pretty well wrapped up. All right, this is a public hearing, so we will open up the public comment portion. I see Mr. Dolgarian would like to join us.
Migrate over there.
Yes, please do, sir. And if you're joining us from home, or the virtual world, you don't necessarily have to be home, please raise your hand or press *9, if you'd like to comment on this. You don't have to sit down. You can just talk into the microphone though.
Happy sitting, so.
Yep.
Me standing.
Just grab the microphone and talk into it, please.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Grant Bulgarian, 20 Extra Street in Providence. As you know, welcome new board members. As you know, I've been paying attention to land use and zoning, for most of my adult life. Let me rephrase, be more accurate. All my adult life, most of my entire life. And, excuse me. I was here because I thought I would have an opportunity to also speak to item number 1 on the comp plan. And you didn't take public comment on the comp plan. So I'm sorry to hear that. Let me, request that, seeing they're gonna come back at least, a couple more times, I'd like to have opportunities to speak, each time they come back. What I wanted to do tonight was ask questions of you all and let you all look into, prospective answers. And then, so the next time we could then build on the answers. But seeing I can't comment on number 1 tonight, I won't ask those questions. I will just stick to, item number 10 or 8, I should say.
As always, if you wanted to jot down some comments and give them to Choyan or Bob, they could be.
I'm not a jot down kind of guy.
Understood.
I apologize. Now, regarding number 8, people have asked me, what kind of a publicly concerned citizen am I? And my response has been that I'm a social liberal and a fiscal conservative. And when government, my perspective over my lifetime has been that government has gotten way more complicated than necessary. And the batch of legislation that the majority leader in the House who represents District of Warwick pushed through, to me was over the top. Now, maybe he's looking at it strictly from a suburban perspective. I don't know. But I'm looking at it from an urban perspective, and I considered a number of provisions that he pushed through inappropriate for us here in Providence. But unfortunately, nobody in Providence was
complaining about that and objecting to it and pointing that out. And so it passed.
That's absolutely not true. I was at the table throughout the process.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Chair.
And did you object to a bunch of this stuff or not?
I worked very constructively with the group, and there were many things I objected to that would have made things way more complicated in Providence than they needed to be.
Oh, so it would have been more complicated than it?
Yes.
Oh, great, okay.
And many of the items passed, that most municipalities don't currently do, we've already done as a municipality to make things easier for land development projects.
Yeah, well, one of the, I looked at this, land use zoning and comp plan perspective from a little longer distance than most folks. And because, I grew up in the 50s and 60s, and that was when there was this massive out-migration from the urban areas throughout the United States. Providence, in 1950, was a city population of, are you ready for this? 250,000. Now, in the 50s and 60s, we shrank population-wise. We hemorrhaged population, as did other urban areas. So now we're saying, oh, we have a housing shortage. Why is that? That's a question I'm gonna leave to you to tell me next month. Why do we have a housing shortage in the city of Providence? And then number two, we've had the full array of zoning in Providence, R1s, R2s, R3s, R4s. And I'm a firm believer that we need that full array because we want a full array of population in the city. I am not in favor of slicing and dicing R1s and R2s and R3s and making them into R4s. And as some of you know, when we decided to make R4 last year into essentially an R10 or an R infinity by not requiring any square footage per dwelling unit, I felt that was going over. If you wanted to increase density in some of the R4 zones, then we should all sit down with a map of the city, look at where the R4 zones are, make a surgical determination of what R4 zones could appropriately absorb increased density and then reduce the density, not eliminate the density. Not eliminate the density requirement, but reduce it. We didn't do that at all. If we want to have some zones in the city of Providence with no density requirement at all, then we ought to call it what it is. I'll call it R9. But we need to be more surgical about this than more sledgehammer about this. Excuse me. Now, one thing that was pointed out, was mentioned just now tonight, is the radius of notice and how that impacts in terms of folks who have automatic right of appeal. Way back when, Providence was an outlier and only noticed 100-foot radius. And if you were, whereas most cities and towns in the state around were 200 or more, some are 4. Providence finally got into line and made it 200. Why? Because the state law required that back in the middle 80s when the state decided to consolidate its zoning enabling acts that were scattered all throughout the general laws, starting, back in the 20s and moving forward, half a century. They decided that, okay, minimum for cities and towns was going to be 200-foot notice. And so Providence, moved it up to 200 foot. They didn't go past 200 foot, but they moved up to 200 feet. Now, based on what Bob just said, lawyers don't want people to be concerned about their neighborhood if they're, 112 feet away. Oh no, only if they're 99 feet away can they be concerned. I object to that. I think that that's wrong. If that's what state law is going to mandate, then we ought to say that that's wrong at the next General Assembly session next month. If the state law doesn't mandate that, then the lawyers can be comfortable with 200 feet. But I just wanted to mention to you, I have been paying attention to our comp plan since the first time we had a comp plan. Well, actually, let me correct that and be more accurate. I've been paying attention to our comp plans in the city of Providence since before we had a comp plan. First city of Providence overall comprehensive plan was in the eighties. When state law required every city and town to have a comp plan and then to do a zoning ordinance that was consistent with the comp plan. In the past, before then, Providence had separate comp plans for different categories, for different subjects. And the only reason I became aware of that was back in the seventies, when I was started paying attention to zoning and to land use. And I was so excited to discover zoning as a tool of intelligent land use. I went to the planning department and said, gee, what do you guys have for comp plans? And they said, well, we don't have a comp plan. We have separate individual separate subject comp plans. And so I looked at those and I was impressed with what they'd done back in the sixties. One of them in particular was the one on recreation and conservation. They went through the entire city and documented all the existing recreation conservation areas and all proposed recreation conservation areas. And what was there already, what the dimension, what the size was, what was there already, what was being proposed. And I was impressed. And lo and behold, I took it upon myself to visit every single one of them. The one that was, I grew up in a neighborhood, I grew up between North Main and Hope. Second floor of a 3-family house. We had no place to play. Played in the street, broke my share of windows, repaired every one. But I wondered, I always envied folks in Pawtucket. I said, well, you guys got a nice recreation facility. I think we don't have anything in my neck of the woods. Well, I saw discovered this comp plan. Wow, look at this, this is great. The nearest thing we had was Lippin Memorial Park, which those of us who lived off Hope Street call the Blackstone Park. People who lived off Blackstone Boulevard call the Hope Street Park. The actual official formal name is Lippin Memorial Park. Well, to show you how detailed that plan was, and I encourage all of you to take a look at it. And they had what the size was in acres. And what was in acres the size of the Memorial Park? 5.99 acres. They didn't say 6, no, 5.99. Boy, they were trying to be as precise as possible. I was impressed. In any event, I thank you all for your public service. Because that's why you're here, because you care. And to me, that's the highest quality is your caring. I look forward to having conversations with you on specifics as far as the new comp plan is concerned, because there are a lot of different pieces of the comp plan that is just sort of being glossed over that, would be appropriate to kind of look into a little bit more. And, besides the land use and zoning, which is what it focuses on, but there are other things that also need to be addressed. And so thank you very much for your time and Merry Christmas to everyone. Happy belated Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Mr. Bulgarian. Is there anyone else at home or in our virtual world that wishes to comment on these development review regulations? And with that, we will close the public comment portion of this agenda item. Anything? You don't have to.
I
know when his brain's working.
Yeah, as I'm doing this, it occurred to me that with respect to notice, I just want to look at something quickly.
Standing.
No, that's okay. Okay, so in 1004, we say that notice is required to be sent by certified mail, return receipt requested for subdivisions, land development projects, and unified development review, and by first-class mail for development plan review. I am looking at the law effective January 1st, 2024. For unified development review. Well, so for land development, major land development and major subdivision, it says first-class mail. And then for unified development review, it refers back to this section. So that's a shall that's in state law. So I'm going to suggest a last minute amendment which is, yes, which is,
I thought I remember that being.
Yeah.
A
so,
difference.
so I think we need to say by first class mail, to be consistent with state law.
Because again, for the new members specifically, most of these changes rose out of the need for us to become consistent with the laws that were passed at the assembly this past year. The zoning changes we already have put forward to the city council. The city council has, actually, that's something we didn't talk about. The city council passed those changes. Their second meeting.
Oh, yeah.
Was last week.
Yes.
Thursday. I
Yes.
believe.
Yeah.
So those zoning changes will take effect that we put forward to the zoning board, or to the city council. Those will take effect on January 1st, along with this document that we're approving tonight. So we will be 100% consistent with the state laws that were passed out of the General Assembly this summer, or this spring. But this also was a gut remodel of our development plan review regulations. It was a new draft because it hadn't been updated for so long that they just basically started from scratch. So it's a much better document, cleaner and easier to understand.
But we can pass this tonight, subject to that change being made and.
Yes, he's making it right now. He's gonna put it on the
As
screen.
long as, yes, as long as it's raised and as long as you make it prior to the close of the public hearing.
Got it. I mean, I can say this.
I'm gonna take.
I'm making the change. I'm making the change.
Yes, I think you need to remove that too. Yep.
I was just gonna say, this is consistent with our discussion last meeting in
Yes.
my mind, so.
Yes, absolutely.
I think
All right.
that sounds great.
I agree. And then we'll be ready to go January 1. All right, so I guess, any other comment, discussion? I'm good. I think we should pass this and call it a year, because it's been a year.
I'll make a motion to approve the changes to the document. What is this?
Yeah, so I think to approve the document as with the changes that are notated, plus the additional change that we just discussed.
Just say so moved.
So moved.
There you go. Second?
I'll second.
All right, we'll go around and do a voice vote. We'll go backwards again. Dave?
Aye.
Charlotte?
Aye.
Will?
Aye.
Noel?
Aye.
I vote aye. All right, we're gonna be compliant with state law on January 1st. I don't know how many other municipalities can say that. I'm not sure if there's many. And that's it. I thank you all for your service, and I wish you a happy and safe and healthy holiday season. And thank you to the staff. You guys do so much work. I hope you get some time to spend and take some for yourselves and your families over this holiday season. With that, we'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
The second?
Second.
All right. See you all next year.
Yeah.